Is there anything we need to take up outside the presence of the jury at this point in time?
Not from the people, Your Honor.
Yes.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and bring the jury in. And Ms. Gratiano, you can move that once the jury gets in and whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor, I'll do that.
Okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. All rise from the jury, please. Thank you. May all be seated. Court will recall 20 CR 1358, People versus Letecia Stauch. Record should reflect the jury has returned to the courtroom. When we took our break, we were in the midst of the testimony of Mr. Leweir. That's where we will resume. Ms. Gratiano.
Yep, and we'll continue on. Well, good afternoon now.
Everyone.
Your Honor, permission to approach to move the easel?
You may go ahead.
Mr. Leweir, we were at a good point where you've now transitioned to another part of the house. I would like to take a moment to take a step back. There are two exhibits, I believe, in front of you.
I just have the one.
Sorry?
I just have one photograph.
Right, one photograph. And what photograph exhibit is that previously admitted?
This is People's Exhibit 446.
I'll project that. Mr. Leweir, if you can take a moment to point out some specific items that we see in People's Exhibit 446. Next to the boards, you testified about a bag that you'd moved, done some Blue Star on, but can you point out that bag in People's 446?
Absolutely. So as you can see in the center of the screen, you see a blue bag next to the boards that I've testified about. This bag appeared to be a softball bag or used for softball materials, but I did not open it to examine what was in there.
And can you point out that bag? To be clear, there may be maybe two bags in that particular photo. Can you point out each of those bags?
Absolutely. I'm going to stand up if that's okay with you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So as you can see in the center of this image here, the blue bag I was referring to earlier, there's a big E in the middle of it. But additionally, there's a box to the south end of the boards. There's also another Easton bag with what appears to be a pink softball bat as well.
Thank you. Now you'd explained that your work on February 3rd of 2020 was split basically into two parts. The second part was to maximize the advantage of what?
We wanted to respond again in the evening to take advantage of the darkness so we could see the Blue Star reactions if present.
Okay. And in terms of that, were you able to document any blue star reactions that you noticed?
Yes, we were. We were able to document it via notes and some photographs. There was a camera malfunction during my response, which I can explain in further detail.
Go ahead.
So I mentioned before the shutter of a camera is what opens and closes for a photograph to be taken. And that when we take our blue star photography, we want to make sure the shutter is open as long as we can to get as much light in. So traditionally, if you have a shutter that is open for a very long time, you're going to have a brighter and brighter photograph. With my camera, there was a shutter issue where I had my shutter open for a very long time, 30 seconds, and my pictures were coming out almost completely dark. And there was a weird noise that my camera was making. So we equated this to a shutter malfunction. So instead of trying to photograph and continually diluting the blue star reaction, we decided it would be best to make a note of it and sample it directly. Because if we kept trying to photograph the reaction, eventually that would continually dilute the sample, which would make it more difficult for a DNA sample to be pulled from it. So in a long-winded answer, we had issues with the camera shutter. So instead of trying to photograph it, we took swabs and noted it immediately. And the camera was eventually replaced that year as well. So
Your Honor, permission to approach with what has been marked as People's Exhibits 477, 486 through 502, previously provided to the defense.
All right, go ahead.
To familiarize yourself with the exhibits that I've handed you.
absolutely.
Mr. Leeward, do you recognize those?
I do. These are photographs that I took during my second visit or the evening of February 3rd, 2020.
And in terms of the documentation that you did, you were able to actually use your camera, but as far as some of the documentation for lighting and things like that, that became problematic with the blue star, right?
That is correct. During the second visit we were there, the CSI Robert Zaleski had his camera. I did switch to that momentarily to photograph some blue star reactions, but overall my camera was having those shutter issues. So again, we predominantly decided that it would be best to note and swab.
And our People's Exhibits 477, 486 through 502, a fair and accurate representation of what you saw that day.
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, we would move for the admission of People's Exhibits 477, 486 through 502.
Defense? Exhibits 477 and 486 through 502 will be admitted. Go ahead.
Great. Mr. Lewer, what we have projected here is People's Exhibit 477. Why did you document this?
This is an overall photograph of the storage room that's in the basement. And depicted on the diagram here, we have the child's bedroom in the southeast corner of the bottom half of this diagram. And that storage room just north of it, that's what I'm photographing here. And when we do our crime scene processing, we will take overalls of every room to document how it looks before we begin our processing. So this is one of those photos. In relation to where this location is at, it's in the northeast corner of this room facing east. So when you walk in, it's the wall on the farthest.
And as a part of the Metro Crime Lab, fair to say other members of the team also did crime scene work in that room as well?
That's correct.
Your Honor, if we can mute the screen so I can move forward.
Yep.
Great, thank you, Your Honor. You can go ahead and unmute it. Appreciate it, Your Honor.
Right.
Oh, I lost it. Thank you. And now as you move forward throughout the house, continuing your documentation with specific areas of the house, what are we seeing in People's Exhibit 486?
This is a difficult photograph to recognize because we don't have any labels for it. Traditionally, when we see visible possible bloodstains, we will label them. But with how small what I observed here was, I didn't want to lose it. So what we're looking at here is that first landing. And when I refer to the landings, the first one, we're referring to going downstairs. So the first landing is the first one you hit when you're going down the stairs. The second one is the second landing when you're going down the stairs. So in this diagram, in the center of the top level, it's going to be this north wall of the first landing. And it's kind of, you can't see it, but there's a zoomed in photograph.
Okay. The zoomed in photograph that you're referring to, would that be People's 487?
Yes, it is. That there was a red possible biological sample on that north wall that we thought would be probative to take a sample of.
People's 488. Can you orient the jury as to where we are now?
So now we are in the southeast bedroom, or Gannon's bedroom. And this is the location. This is right when you're standing in the doorway. So we're standing in the doorway at the top left side of his room on this diagram, facing the southeast corner.
People's 489.
This is another photograph of that corner. However, now we're standing in the northeast corner facing southeast.
People's 490.
This is the direct east wall of that corner we were just referring to.
And based on what you're looking at here, photographing this particular wall, are there any apparent abnormalities that you're seeing when you look at this photo in terms of blood?
Overall, no, but there were observations later made, but at the time there weren't.
People's 491.
So this is another photograph of the southeast corner. It is very yellow because we will take a photograph before we do any blue star without any flash photography. So it will come out usually this yellowish hue. So this is the photograph I took before any blue star processing. And then any photographs subsequent to that will be of that blue star reaction in the same exact location.
And Mr. Lewer, are you familiar with what object generally is in that corner of that bedroom?
I was informed that there was a bed there at one point.
And by the time you'd enter that room, had that bed been removed?
Correct. I did not observe a bed in that corner. However, I did observe a bed in the southwest corner, so on the opposite side of this corner.
People's Exhibit 492. Can you explain to the jury what you've documented here?
This is the photograph from that corner. This is a blue star reaction. And this is after I did switch cameras on the second visit or the second processing. But this is a blue star reaction with blue and whitish blue chemiluminescence around that southeast corner.
And Mr. Lewer, would you be able to use the pointer to distinguish between the floor versus the wall area?
Absolutely. So with this photograph being so dark, it may be difficult to tell, but towards the bottom of the screen here, you can see kind of a white upside down V. To the upper left side of that V is the east wall of the room. To the upper right hand side of that V is the south wall. And then directly below that upside down V is the floor of that corner of the room.
And based on the color of the reaction that you see here, is there anything that you can say or opine as to the color and what that means?
So with it being a blue chemiluminescence, it is presumptive positive, is a presumptive positive reaction with blue star, indicating that it could be blood.
People's Exhibit 493. What are you looking at and documenting here?
This is another photograph of the same reaction. However, the spray has been distributed differently, so that's why there's a different appearance now. But again, this is another photograph of the presumptive positive reaction in that corner of the southeast bedroom.
Compared to People's Exhibit 492, would 493 show a greater height of the wall? Or is that just additional spray that you put to document that?
I wouldn't make any conclusions based on that alone, but because when you're spraying with Blue Star, you're spraying where you can. You may not be hitting every single possible area, possible blood stains, but I will say the reaction does span a higher level in this photograph than the previous photograph.
People's Exhibit 494, what are you documenting here?
So once we saw the Blue Star reaction in that corner of the room and some discoloration on the carpet, we thought it would be probative to cut the carpet up to see if we could see any visible possible blood stains. And at that point, when we cut the carpet up, we saw a reddish brown stain consistent with blood stains on the underside of the carpet.
And as we had gone through the prior exhibit showing the carpet, was there any discoloration that was apparent on the top of the carpet as you documented?
Yes, it was darker and brown, but it was faint, but it was still present.
And can you point out, let's see, on People's Exhibit 495, what are you specifically showing in here?
This is a zoomed in photograph of the underside of the carpet, kind of highlighting that reddish brown that area of possible blood stains.
And given that you're seeing some possible blood stains soak through the carpet, what's the next level or layer that you're interested in?
When we're concerned about absorption, we're going to continue on to see how far down it goes. So with carpet, traditionally, there's also padding underneath. So we pull that padding up, which will then have the concrete sublayer. So we're just trying to see how far down that absorption of any biological material would go.
People's Exhibit 496, what have you documented here with regard to the padding and the concrete flooring?
So as I alluded to, we're going to keep searching further down. This is after that padding has been pulled back. So now you can see there was an amount of saturation through the carpet and the padding that resulted on the concrete subfloor.
And to be clear, the padding that we see with a large reddish spot, would that, if it laid back down, would that go directly over the corner area of that room below the socket?
Correct. Any of the reddish stains you're seeing in this photo would have been superimposed on top of each other.
So you're essentially peeling back layers of an onion, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And People's Exhibit 497, what are you documenting here?
It's the zoomed in photograph of the underside of that carpet padding, highlighting that reddish brown possible blood.
In 498?
Similarly, we're looking at that same staining on the concrete subfloor now.
499.
As we kept pulling carpet back, we observed additional areas of possible blood on the underside of the carpet. And here we're showing how far we pulled the carpet back and seeing additional possible blood stains.
People's Exhibit 500. This is a close-up photo, but what are you focusing on here?
So this is slightly rotated from the previous image, as you can tell by that cut out L. But now in the center of the screen, you can see sort of a brownish stain there as well. We thought that was consistent with possible blood stains, so we wanted to document and collect that as well.
People's Exhibit 501. I do see what you see here is now some layers of measurement that you've applied to the back of the carpet. What are we looking at here?
We're looking at that same photograph that we just observed, but this time I put a scale down showing the size and dimensions of that possible blood stain.
People's Exhibit 502.
This is a further zoomed in photograph of that same area.
Now, as you explained, noticing that you likely think that it may be blood, are you going to Blue Star these areas?
No, when we are using Blue Star, we will exclusively use that for latent blood stains. And the reason is if you have visible blood stains, you can sample that and test it later. However, you do not have that opportunity with latent blood stains because they are invisible, you can't see them. So if we were to have visible blood stains, all we're doing is diluting it further for any subsequent DNA testing. So when we saw this, we didn't want to test it any further. We wanted to cut it out and collect it in a way that it would be preserved best as possible.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with what has been marked as People's Exhibit 503 and 504, previously inspected by the defense.
You may, go ahead.
Now, Mr. Lewer, I'm going to ask you to look at what's been marked as People's Exhibit 504 and first here,
Oh, boy.
503.
Perfect.
You recognize it?
I do. Could I look at the seals real fast? Yes, I do recognize this. This is that carpet that was directly in the southeast corner of the bedroom, and it also includes the padding. And again, I recognize this based on the label indicating where it was at, having my employee number, and then the tape seals on it having my initials. However, with it being having the package been open, there were additional analyses done by additional forensic personnel.
No, and that's specific to People's Exhibit 504. I think just below that is 503. Can you also take a moment to inspect People's Exhibit 503 as well?
Absolutely. This one was 503.
Oh, okay, 504 then. And in terms of People's Exhibit 504, do you recognize it as well in the same way?
Yes, this is the carpet sample from that second area of possible blood stains we observed. I separated them out because there was enough of a delineation between the one blood stain pattern, possible blood stain pattern, and the second one. So this is that carpet and that padding, again, with the label and the additional tape seals that it is the same item.
And would you say that's in the substantially same condition as when you last collected it?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, we would move for the admission of People's Exhibits 503 and 504.
No objection. Exhibits 503 and 504 will be admitted. Go ahead.
Mr. Lewer, as you move forward in the room, you're continuing to document the different stains, et cetera, that you see in the room. What else, in addition to blood, were you also tasked with looking for? In terms of defects, projectiles, that sort of thing.
So when we were initially called, we were told to look for blood stains and defects, or latent blood stains and possible projectile defects. During that search, we didn't observe any additional or any defects at all, but we did do the searches for the latent blood stains.
Okay. Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with what has been marked as People's Exhibits 505 through 509.
You may, go ahead.
Do you generally recognize those?
I do.
How do
These
you
are-
recognize?
Sorry.
It's okay.
These are photographs that were taken the evening of February 3rd during my scene processing.
And they include People's Exhibits 505 through 509. Are those also fair and accurate representations of what you saw that day?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, we would move for the admission of People's Exhibits 505 through 509.
Exhibits 505 through 509 will be admitted. Go ahead.
Now, Mr. Lee, we're seeing a lot of photos of carpet. How many photos would you normally take at a scene?
So during a crime scene processing, it's not abnormal to have anywhere between 500 to 1,000 plus photographs. Most photographs we use are to show the conditions of the scene before, during, and after our scene processing. However, there are times where we take photographs, we'll have placards out, we'll have labels out highlighting particular items. But during a search warrant, we're documenting as we're searching.
Okay. And so what we see in People's Exhibit 505 here, What was important again for you to document closely here?
As you can see along the right hand side of this image, that's the original possible bloodstain that was under the carpet. What we're looking at here is an area on the concrete subfloor under that second possible bloodstain that we observed.
People's Exhibit 506. We see some measurements here. What are you documenting?
This is additional possible blood stains that were on the concrete subfloor under that second pattern we observed.
And is the idea behind putting this sort of measurement indicator to give you a sense of scope, some sort of frame of reference?
Absolutely.
People's Exhibit 507.
Again, this is a photograph of that first area of possible bloodstains, but now a scale is included to show the overall dimensions of that possible stain.
And Your Honor, permission for the witness to publish People's Exhibits first 503 and then 504 to the jury by walking past the jury box.
Oh, yes, you may go ahead.
Mr. Lewer, if you would go ahead and walk 503 past the jury slowly so that they can review it.
This is People's Exhibit 503. And you can see in my left hand is the carpet, in the middle is the carpet padding, and in the right hand is the original packaging that I placed the padding and the carpet into.
And based on the way that it's packaged, you're actually able to show the jury the other side of that carpet as well?
Correct. It's placed in this packaging for display purposes. This is not something that the lab itself would do. This is the underside of the carpet padding and the underside of the carpet itself. Now that it's flipped, in my right hand is the underside of the carpet. In the middle is the underside of the carpet padding, and in my left hand is the underside of my packaging.
Thank you, sir. And if you would do the same with People's Exhibit 504 as well.
This is People's Exhibit 504. This is that secondary carpet area that I alluded to before. In my left hand is the packaging. In the middle is the upper side of the carpet. And in my right hand is the upper side of the carpet padding.
And if you would show the jury the back side of People's Exhibit 504 as well.
Same thing now, but in the left hand is the padding, all the underside. In the middle is the carpet. In the right hand side is the packaging.
Thank you. We talked about various abnormalities that you would be interested in documenting. And so what we see in People's Exhibit 508, is there anything that's of note for you and why you photographed this?
Yes, I photographed this highlighting a chip in what looks like the windowsill. Towards the center of this image, you can see a white windowsill with kind of what appears to be missing paint. This was consistent with being in the area of where the bed originally was. So I thought if an incident did occur there, based on the blue star reaction and the amount of possible bloodstains, this may be noteworthy.
And what we see in People's Exhibit 509, would this be the close-up of that defect that you observed?
Correct. I can't determine what that came from. Again, I'm sure we all have nicks like that somewhere in our home, but I thought it would be of interest to photograph just in case.
And as you noted, there were various reactions along the wall of Gannon Stauch's bedroom. And there was a particular area of a focus that you had with regard to an outlet. Can you explain to the jury what you noted there?
Yes. So in that southeast corner where the bed originally was, there was an outlet cover along the east side of the wall, kind of towards the floor trim. With that being said, when we observed the outlet cover, there appeared to be dilute possible blood stains. So we photographed it and collected that item.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with what has been marked as People's Exhibit 510, 511, and 512.
May, go ahead.
Mr. Leeward, I handed you People's Exhibits 510 and 511. We'll take those to start. How do you recognize those?
These are photographs that I took during the second visit of the outlet cover in that southeast corner of the southeast bedroom.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of what you observed that day?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, permission to admit People's Exhibit 510 and 511.
No objection. 510, 511 will be admitted. Go ahead.
Permission to publish as well.
You may.
So here what we have projected behind you is People's Exhibit 510. Does that depict that outlet you were talking about?
Yes, it does. And as you can see, I've alluded to the upside down white V in the photo many times. This is, again, that southeast corner of that room. And along the east wall, you have that outlet cover towards the center of this image.
People's Exhibit 511 for scale. What are you noting here?
So I put a scale on there to outline the dimensions of the outlet cover. But then when you examine the outlet cover more in depth, for example, along the right-hand side of that cover, you can see very faint reddish brown staining consistent with dilute blood stains. So I'm documenting the outlet cover as well as any possible stains on that outlet cover.
And Mr. Leeward, can you point to those areas that you're noting specifically for the jury?
Absolutely. So on the bottom part of this electrical outlet, you can see some what appears to be brownish staining under that first, the bottom part of that outlet. And then additionally, you can see some, it's faint and difficult to see on this screen, but you can also see what appears to be some flow marks or very dilute marks with linear orientation.
And People's Exhibit 512 is not a photograph. Do you recognize what that is?
I do.
What is it?
This is the outlet cover, again, based on the label with my initials and my employee number. And there are additional seals on here indicating it's been examined by further forensic personnel.
And in terms of, again, the method that you use to process, would you have swabbed this? What would you have done to this particular area?
Again, I would not have swabbed this because I want to make sure the sample is unsaturated as possible. With that being said, we did blue star this corner of the room. We knew there was a reaction in that corner of the room, so I would note that there was a blue star positive reaction in the outlet cover, indicating that there is presumptive blood present. So there's no further swabbing that needed to be necessary, and it would be handed off to the DNA unit.
Now, you had mentioned dilute, some dilute blood stains there. Can you remind the jury what you mean specifically about dilute?
Yes, so obviously when you cut your finger, you have very red, thick blood that comes out. And then when you try to clean it up, like if you're in the sink, when you wash it off, it starts to appear runny and starts to become a little bit more clear. That's what I'm alluding to here, is that when I say dilute blood stains, that you have very clear, very faint reddish brown staining instead of the very obvious present red color of blood.
In terms of, you've sprayed this area with Blue Star. Is there anything that you would have noted as it related to the Blue Star reaction in this area? Is there anything that could have told you or anything that you noticed there?
Other than the reaction being blue, indicating that it was presumptive positive for blood, there wasn't anything else that I noted outside of the reaction.
And so the volume of Blue Star that you spray, how would you describe it? Is it a fine mist? Are there large droplets? What is it?
It's a very fine mist. So it's a standard spray bottle that you receive. It's not like a Febreze spray. It's more of a, you pump a few times, and if you usually will get a reaction after 2 or 3 pumps. So we try to hold off after using as much as we need to see the reaction.
And so in terms of, you're noting that there's dilute bloodstain marks, what appear to be that on this outlet cover, would that have been due to the Blue Star spray creating that? Or could that have been done, for example, by something like cleaning?
It could be both. Because the Blue Star is a liquid that is water-based, there will be some dilution, but the amount you're spraying isn't going to dilute it to this level.
And based on what you're seeing with the outlet cover, you're working outside in, what are you going to do next?
I'm going to take that outlet cover off. I'm going to collect it. I'm going to see what's underneath the outlet cover.
You're under permission to approach with what's been marked and previously provided to the defense as People's Exhibits 513 through 515. 516 and 517 as well.
Go ahead.
You're under permission to approach.
You may.
Mr. Lewer, I'm handing you People's Exhibit 513, 14, 15, and 17. But before I get there, Your Honor, based on the foundation laid by the witness, people have moved for the admission of People's Exhibit 500.
Defense?
No objection.
512 will be admitted. Go ahead.
Mr. Lewer, can you take a, can you take a moment to review that?
Absolutely.
Now, you explained that you collected the cover, which is People's Exhibit 512, but you also mentioned that you're going to work outside in. And so, Your Honor, if I haven't already asked, permission to publish as well, People's Exhibits 513 through 515.
You may go ahead.
Thank you. Oh.
Actually,
I thought I
did you ask to admit those?
I thought I did without objection, but Your Honor, permission to formally admit People's Exhibits 513 through 515
Through 517.
through 517. I just thought I would take them in kind of different chunks or different items.
Mr. Tellini?
No objection. Your Honor.
Exhibits 513 through 517 will be admitted.
Great.
Go ahead.
Now, what we have projected behind you is People's Exhibit 513. Can you explain what you did now in terms of processing this area?
This is a photograph of the electrical outlet itself with the cover removed, highlighting what could appear to be on the outlet itself.
People's Exhibit 514.
This is a photograph from a different angle, slightly askew and up to the right of the outlet cover, because we observed dilute possible bloodstains. And this is a good example of that reddish brown color. Instead of a very strong solid red, it appears that there's a clear middle with some of that coloration on the outside. So this would be a good example of possible dilute blood.
People's Exhibit 515.
Another photograph just from a slightly different angle.
Great. And on the witness stand before you, you have People's Exhibit 516. How do you recognize what that is?
These are the swabs of those possible bloodstains on the cover, on the outlet itself, because I wasn't going to remove the cover based on possible electrical hazards, and it's easier to swab it than take it with us. But I identify it based on my employee number on here and the tape seals on the back, with additional tape seals on here indicating it's been tested.
And so, for example, do you need to open that envelope to know that those are the swabs that you collected?
No.
Okay. For those reasons, while the defense hasn't objected, Your Honor, I would ask if People's Exhibit 516 can be admitted as well.
No objection.
516 will be admitted. Go ahead.
And sir, I believe you have People's Exhibit 517 as well. How do you recognize what that is?
This is a photograph of the room I took after we had removed the outlet cover. and finish cutting out the carpet from that corner.
Okay. And when you exit or finish processing a room, are you also documenting that as well?
Yes, I mentioned earlier that when we are taking our photographs of our scene, it's during, it's before, during, and after processing. And we want to document how we left the area after we finish processing as well. So that's this photograph.
Great. And again, Your Honor, while not objected to by the defense, based on that, permission to admit and publish People's Exhibit 517.
Objection.
517 will be admitted. You can go ahead and publish.
Okay. And so here, this is the last documentation of the work that you did in Gannon Stauch's bedroom.
Correct.
Based on the overall observations that you observed specifically related to that corner, what was the next step in terms of processing the scene at Gannon Stauch's residence where he lived?
So now that we had observed what appeared to be a larger amount of possible blood stains, indicating that there was a potential bloodshedding event, there was going to be, it was going to come down to trying to find what could have caused that. So whether it be a blunt force instrument or a firearm or whatnot, it would have to be trying to narrow down and collecting anything that we could regarding a possible injuring item.
And where were you directed to document and search?
During my overalls, I said I photographed the entirety of the house. There was a firearm, a pistol located in the upstairs master bedroom on a chest of drawers that was of interest now because of the possible bloodshedding event.
And Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with what has been marked as People's Exhibits 478 through 483.
You may go ahead.
Thank you.
Do you recognize those?
I'll take a look real fast.
Go ahead.
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize those?
These are additional photographs that I took within the master bedroom of the room and of the handgun we observed in on the evening of February 3rd.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of what you observed that day?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd move for the admission of People's Exhibit 478 through 483.
Defense. 478 through 483 will be admitted.
Your Honor, can you mute the screen just to be safe?
Oh, yeah.
Can unmute it, Your Honor. Thank you. Mr. Leeward, can you explain what we're looking at in People's Exhibit 478?
This is a photograph of the master bedroom on the main level of that 6627 Mandan Drive. We've alluded a lot to the southeast bedroom in the basement, but referring to the diagram, you can see at the top right hand of the main level, when you walk through the laundry room, if you keep walking south, that is the main, that's the master bedroom on the main level with the doorway at the northwest corner.
All right, and just for the purposes of the record, you're pointing to the diagram on People's Exhibit 442?
That is correct.
Great. Projected behind you, 479. Again, what are you moving forward in the room for?
This is another photograph of the room, but now we're standing in the northeast corner facing the southwest corner.
People's Exhibit 480.
We're facing the chest of drawers that was in the southeast corner of the bedroom. And in the center of the image, you can see a black rectangle. That is the firearm that we collected.
People's Exhibit 481. Oh, geez. 481.
This is mid-range photographs showing the firearm itself now.
And 482.
This is a close-up of the firearm before I've rendered it safe. Whenever we collect firearms on a scene, we will render it safe. We'll check the chamber for any ammunition and we'll remove the magazine, but we want to photograph it in its condition before we do any of that. So this is that photograph.
And again, did you collect this particular firearm?
Yes, we collected this firearm.
Okay. People's Exhibit 483. What are we looking at here? Where is this taken?
So now I've placed this on an envelope to show, to have a cleaner area to take the photograph. But as you can see now, the slide is locked back. There is no round or cartridge in the chamber, and there's a scale above the gun helping indicate size.
Now, you had indicated that based on what appeared to be some sort of bloodletting event that occurred in Gannon Stauch's bedroom, is this what allowed you to then seize and take this particular firearm?
Yes.
You're under permission to approach with what's been marked as People's Exhibit 484 and 485.
You may go ahead.
Yes, I recognize these.
How do you recognize those?
So the box that I was holding, that contains the firearm that we collected here. I recognize that with the label and my employee number, as well as the tape seals. And then the envelope that I was holding, which is People's Exhibit 485, that is the magazine from within the firearm, containing approximately 16 cartridges.
Now, at this time, I'll direct your attention to People's Exhibit 484. What can you tell based on the markings on that box?
I can tell that it's been processed for fingerprints as well as DNA sampling, and that it appears that there have been additional exams done by the firearms unit as well as the DNA unit.
Okay. And at this time, would you use the scissors that are next to you to open that box?
Absolutely.
And to be clear, while you're doing that, when you receive a firearm and you take it into evidence, what have you done specifically with this particular firearm that we see photographed in People's Exhibit 583?
So when we collect a firearm, when I say render it safe, what that means is I will lock the slide back. That will disengage the firearm. And when that occurs, a chambered round, if there is a round within the chamber, that will also be expelled. So now there's no cartridge in the chamber that can be fired. And I will also remove the magazine, meaning that there is no ammunition in the gun and that is not able to be fired with the slide lock backed.
And when you checked the chamber of this particular firearm, was there a round in the chamber?
There was no round in the chamber.
Okay. Do you recognize, after you've opened the box, People's Exhibit 584 before you?
May I handle it to observe the serial number?
Your Honor, just to confirm, that particular item has it still been in the state that it's been rendered safe?
Yes, it is safe.
Your Honor, permission for the witness to further inspect? Sorry.
Got to put some gloves on. I'm just pointing it in a safe direction.
And Mr. Lewer, why are you taking a moment to look at the firearm more closely?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Why are you taking a moment to look at the firearm more closely? Is that to ensure that is in fact no chamber in the round, et cetera?
Correct. I'm ensuring that there is no chamber in the round, that it is a safe firearm, and that it has the same serial number as what is labeled on the label.
I guess I should just say round in the chamber.
Correct. So I remember with this firearm, there is a particular grip cover that is covering the serial number. So to preserve the evidence, I'm not going to remove that cover, but it is consistent with the firearm that I observe here, especially with that grip cover being there. It's giving me a friendly reminder.
Okay. And would you say that's in substantially the same condition as when you last handled it and booked it into evidence?
I would. There is a yellow discoloration on it now, which is indicative of something we do when we fingerprint process our items of evidence. But other than that, it is in the same condition.
Your Honor, at this time, permission to admit People's Exhibit 404 at this time.
484.
484.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Defense. As long as 484.
It's 484.
484 will be admitted. Go ahead.
All right. And Your Honor, permission to publish to the jury by the witness walking past the jury box.
You may go ahead.
So as I'm walking by, for you guys to take a look at that discoloration I alluded to before. As you can see in the photograph, the firearm is black, but now there's this greenish, white, yellow hue on it. That is a process that we do when we fingerprint process, and that's why there's this discoloration. But again, there's also no magazine here, and there's no chambered round. I would have collected the magazine separately from the firearm.
Thank you. And now for People's Exhibit 485, how do you recognize that exhibit?
This People's Exhibit 485 is the magazine that was collected from the firearm itself.
And it's in an envelope. Do you need to open up that envelope to be sure that that's the magazine that you collected?
I do not. There are additional labels and seals from individuals within our lab, which would have it be in substantial condition as it was collected.
And Your Honor, at this time, we'd move for the admission of People's Exhibit 485.
No objection.
485 will also be admitted. Go ahead.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Lewer, you explained what you noticed about the magazine and the cartridges. Can you remind the jury what you observed with regard to how many cartridges the magazine appeared to have a capacity for and how many cartridges you observed as an approximation?
Yes. So whenever we have a magazine for a firearm, there's usually an indicator on the magazine saying how many it can be loaded with. That number may not always be true, whereas sometimes someone can force an additional cartridge in. So for the purposes of this magazine, I put an approximately 17 round capacity magazine. And on this magazine, there were window spots where you could see the cartridges. And I could count 16, but sometimes that number is deceiving because one could be hidden in there. So I put there are approximately 16 cartridges within. So in total, it's an approximately 17 round capacity magazine with approximately 16 cartridges within.
And specifically, again, that magazine was found in relation to the firearm, with the firearm?
Correct. It was within the firearm when I collected it, and I removed it and collected it separately.
And is that pursuant to the policy that you have with the Metro Crime Lab?
Yes, with our policy, we cannot put loaded firearms into evidence, so we will always remove the magazine. And additionally, when we have magazines with ammunition in them, we do not want to remove the ammunition from within because it may destroy fingerprints and any DNA evidence. So instead of pulling out the cartridges and counting them, I believed it would be most probative to preserve the fingerprints and DNA if present.
And based on how you make that item of evidence, that firearm specifically available, is it now available to other members of the Metro Crime Lab for additional processing?
Yes.
Testing?
Correct, yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with what has been marked as People's Exhibit 518 through 527.
You may go ahead.
Mr. Lewer, I'll first take 518 and 519 separately. Do you recognize each of those?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize them?
People's Exhibit 518 are the swabs of the blue star presumptive positive reactions I observed in the stairwell between the main level and the basement. And then People's Exhibit 519 are the presumptive positive blue star reactions within the basement level of the residence, which would include the storage room and the southeast bedroom at the base of the stairs.
And so you saw a number of photos in the basement level of the residence, some nearby Gannon's room and nearby those stair areas. Those swabs generally taken from those areas?
That is correct, yes.
And just to be clear, can you also point out on People's Exhibit 442 for the jury where those swabs come from?
Absolutely. So I mentioned the camera malfunction before. So again, what was most important was collecting those samples and noting it. One way to diagram where those came from is to include them in my diagram here. So on the main level or the top part of the diagram here, we're focusing now on the green dots. The green dots in my diagram represent blue star reactions on my second visit or the evening of February 3rd. So as you can see here, we have one on the first stair set going downward. We have one that looks like it's outside of the stairwell. That was an error on my part. That one was within the first landing of the stairwell. I placed that incorrectly. That is my fault. We have a blue star reaction on the second landing, the second set of stairs going downward, and then on the bottom half of this diagram, now that we're in the basement level, we have one right at the base of the stairs, the floor right in front of the storage room and Gannon's bedroom, and then we have a green dot within the storage room and within the southeast corner of his bedroom. So essentially, we have blue star reactions along the stairwell and then at the storage room and his room as well.
And what would have been the path of travel if someone were to travel from the basement area to Gannon's room? Can you point out on People's Exhibit 442 what that path of travel would have been?
Actually, the most direct path of travel between Gannon's room to go upstairs into the garage would be out his room, up the stairwell, and then directly to the garage. And as you can see here, we have blue star reactions in that general pathway.
Thank you. I've also handed you People's Exhibit 520 through 527. Those are different, right?
These are different.
Okay, what are those?
I responded to the address on February 5th for another search, and these are photographs that were taken during that search.
Okay, and are those also fair and accurate representations of what you saw on February 5th of 2020?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, we would move for the admission of People's Exhibit 518 through 527.
Done. Exhibits 518 through 527 will be admitted. Go ahead.
And Your Honor, permission to publish People's Exhibits 520 through 527.
You may go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Lewer, behind you is going to be People's Exhibit 520. Can you point out to the jury what you've documented here?
Yes, so there isn't a mid-range photograph showing what this is, but at the bottom of the screen, you can see the red washer and dryer we've mentioned before. So what we're looking at here is the top of that washer and dryer in the laundry room. And what's of interest, or what was of interest for us in this photograph, was a bottle of vinegar on top of one of those appliances.
And based on seeing, again, the bloodletting event, or at least what had occurred, the remnants of something in Gannon Stauch's bedroom, what was the specific scope of what you were looking for on February 5th of 2020 now?
We wanted to document and search for any cleaning products because now that we had a bloodshedding event with dilute possible bloodstains, there was evidence that there may have been possible cleanup. So we wanted to search for any possible cleaning materials that would have been used in that action.
Okay. People's Exhibit 521, what is this a close-up of?
This is a close-up of a bottle of distilled vinegar from top of one of those appliances.
People's Exhibit 522, where are we at? Can you orient the jury now what we see and what room we're in?
Yes, now we are in the kitchen, which is on the main level of the home. And now we are looking under the sink because we wanted to pull out any cleaning supplies that would have been for carpet or upholstery, not specifically for any dishes. But this is a photograph of the under sink doors open with some products pulled out.
People's Exhibit 523, what are you close-up documenting here?
This is just a close-up photograph of the contents that have not been pulled out from under the sink.
People's Exhibit 524, what are you documenting here?
This is a zoomed-in photograph of smoke and odor eliminator, a bottle of it under the sink.
And in People's Exhibit 525, what are some other cleaning products that you notice below the cabinet?
Again, this is the other side of that sink cabinet now, where there's a box of Arm & Hammer cleaner under the sink, or baking soda, I believe.
People's Exhibit 526, is that a close-up of that box you were referring to?
Baking soda.
People's Exhibit 527, is this the overall shot of the various substances that you found under the kitchen sink in that cabinet area?
Correct. This is with some of the contents pulled out.
And you can take a seat. You've walked us through at least 3 instances that you were present to document in the residence at 6627 Mandan Drive. Those 3 dates were 2 dates with 3 instances that you searched. Or what again?
February 3rd around 11 o'clock, February 3rd around 6 p.m., and then February 5th closer to the lunch hour as well.
And while you were present on scene, was there any obvious signs of blood or a struggle that you observed on any of those times?
So when we responded on February 5th, it was much more lit in Gannon's bedroom, and we had many individuals focusing on the walls, and we observed very, very tiny non-diluted blood stains or possible blood stains. So we called in one of our crime scene investigators to help document those blood stains.
And another member of the Metro Crime Lab team would have done an in-depth review of those smaller, very clear blood stains.
Correct. They would have done a documentation of those stains, which would have allowed them to do any blood stain pattern analysis going forward.
That's not your area of expertise, right?
That's not my area of expertise.
To be clear, the 2 times that you were present on February 2nd of 2020 and February 5th of 2020, at any point, did you see any shell casings?
I did not see any cartridge casings during any of my visits.
Aside from the gun, did you see any other items such as a knife that would have been misplaced or in another area of the house?
I did not see any knives in any odd places in the house.
Okay. In terms of documenting what you saw and observed in Gannon Stauch's bedroom or other areas of the house, such as the master bedroom, was there any obvious signs of blood-stained clothing?
No, I did not see any bloodstained clothing. I did collect a sheet with apparent blood or possible bloodstains on it from the additional bedroom in the basement. I was informed it belonged to the teenage daughters.
Ms. Gratiano, do you have a response?
Your Honor, he's just testified that he's collected it, but also in his practice as a CSI, he's relying on information from other members of law enforcement in the collection of evidence.
And without further foundation, I'll sustain the objection.
Specific to that particular item, were you given some additional information in terms of other members of law enforcement, either a supervisor, that had evidentiary value? Potential evidentiary value?
Yes.
Okay. And in your role as a CSI, in the collection of evidence, are you relying on information and or briefings that other members are providing to you to collect evidence?
Correct. There is a level of requiring information from individuals so we can place the scene. For example, if I did not know the southeast bedroom was Gannon's bedroom, we would have started searching in other places. So when we are provided information, it's to help scope down our search, and which can also help with identifying items of evidence.
Okay. And so based on a briefing that you had received, did that particular item become of evidentiary interest in the investigation?
It did, with there being possible bloodstains on it.
Thank you. Your Honor, we'll pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Hey, sir, how you doing?
I'm doing great today. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad. So let's go to that, what we were just talking about. That, was it a sheet or a comforter?
It was a comforter on the bed that I collected, and I collected an additional sheet from the closet of that room that had a blue star reaction.
And
So
that's
I
an,
apologize.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm so sorry.
That's it's from the northwest bedroom.
Correct. That's the basement northwest bedroom.
And based upon everybody that was there, and also based upon what was in that bedroom as far as color schemes, clothing, so forth, that appeared to be the bedroom of a teenage girl.
Correct.
You're aware that Ms. Stauch has a 17-year-old teenage girl by the name of Harley Hunt.
I did not know the name, but I knew that a teenage female resided in the home.
And there was actually there was a blood stain on that mattress, and that mattress was collected.
We did not collect the mattress, but we collected the comforter because the comforter was superimposed on the mattress. You could say that the possible bloodstains were transferred or transferred onto the mattress. So we collected the comforter in lieu of the mattress.
Okay, because it looked like there would have been whatever that blood stain was, it would have been the same source of blood, both for the comforter and both for the mattress.
It
in
appeared-
your opinion.
It appeared consistent with that, yes.
And so you don't necessarily have to collect the mattress, you can just collect the comforter, and that will be enough to tell you whose blood that was.
Correct.
And then there was also stuffed in the laundry basket of that same teenage girl's room, a sheet.
Correct.
That sheet looked like it had blood on it.
It had a blue star reaction that we documented.
Okay, and a blue star reaction would indicate that there may be blood on that sheet.
Correct. It would indicate that there is possibly blood present on that sheet.
So in the teenage girl's bedroom on that February 5th search, you found 2 items that appeared to have blood on them, correct?
Correct.
No further questions.
Redirect. Do any of the jurors have any questions for Mr. LeWare? All right, looks like we have one. All right, counsel approach, please. Mr. Lewer, if Blue Star is a presumptive test for blood, how is testing accomplished to separate Blue Star from an actual blood sample?
So blue star is reacting with the heme component of the blood, whereas when we have a DNA sample, they're looking for DNA within different components of the blood. So the blue star itself is not overriding the DNA because the DNA component is still present in the sample.
That may have answered this question, but I'll ask it. Does Blue Star impact or affect the actual blood sample?
What would impact the sample is how much we're spraying or diluting the sample, but blue star does not negatively affect DNA processing further on down the line.
All right, I will allow reasonable follow-up as to that question or those questions only. Prosecution?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Defense?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you all.
Prosecution, call your next witness, please.
Judge, our next witness is an expert and we need to gather some exhibits together. And I'm wondering if we could just give the jury about a 10-minute break to do that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Or if you want to do the afternoon break too.
No, we'll probably do two of them because it's a little bit early. So what we're going to do is take about a 10-minute recess. Again, you may not discuss the case among yourselves, may not discuss the case with anyone else. With that, all rise for the jury, please. Thank you. May all be seated. Record should reflect the jury has left the courtroom. Who is the next one?
Stephanie,
My thought would be that we go with her until like 4 o'clock, then take about another 10-minute recess or so, something like that. Otherwise, they're going to be sitting there for like 2.5 hours. So,
Yes.
okay, all right. Jury's not present in the courtroom. Are we good to go?
We are, Your Honor.
Yeah, okay, so you have everything you need.
Yep,
We have
all on the table in front of the witness stand there.
Perfect, okay. All right, let's go ahead. Is there anything we need to bring up outside the presence of the jury at this point in time? Prosecution,
Not from us, Judge.
defense?
No, sir.
All right, let's go ahead and bring them in. Oh, that's a good way to do that. Somebody was smart. Either that or it did it on its own.
So, well, I don't think so, because the clips, I pulled the clips at the hole, but
And it usually tips the other way because the paper on it.
yeah.
So. smart way to do it. They don't work.
If they stay up.
If they stay up. Just remember the poor guy that almost got hit in the chin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Or 3 photos, I should say.
All rise for the jury, please. Thank you. You may all be seated. Court will recall 20 CR 1358, People versus Letecia Stauch. Record should reflect the jury has returned to the courtroom. Prosecution, call next witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would call Stephanie Happ.
Ms. Hepp, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, ma'am. You swear affirm the testimony about to give in this man will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand. Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ma'am. How are you?
Good afternoon, good, and you?
Good, thank you. Will you please introduce yourself to our jury and then spell your first and last name for our court reporter?
Yes, my name is Stephanie Happ, Happstefanie. I am the senior firearms examiner with the Colorado Springs Metro Crime Lab.
So what education do you have that allows you to do that job?
My education consists of a Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry with an emphasis in criminalistics. I received that from the Metropolitan State College of Denver. During my degree program, I was required to complete an internship, and I did so with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department's Crime Lab for a period of about 2 years. While I was with them, I had the opportunity to work in all the different areas of their laboratory, so I got a good understanding of a variety of different forensic analyses. I had training in latent print processing and examination, crime scene investigation, controlled substance analysis, and question document analysis. After my time with them, I spent a short period of time with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and then I was hired in my current capacity in October of 2007 as a firearms examiner, and that's where my firearms training began. That first year was very much like an apprenticeship where I simply shadowed the senior examiner so that I could get an understanding of the types of things I would be asked to do. After approximately a year, I was accepted to the California Criminalistics Institute, where I completed an additional year of intensive study in all the different types of firearms-related analyses. I had training in serial number restoration, shooting incident reconstruction, a variety of armorers courses that were designed to teach me how to identify how different types of firearms should work and how to identify abnormalities if there were any present. I spent a large period of time focusing on the microscopic tool mark comparison process as it relates to firearms as well as other types of tools. At the conclusion of that year's period, I returned to the crime lab and I completed a series of competency and proficiency tests and became established as the primary examiner for the lab. To date, I've had over 1,000 hours of training with respect to all those different types of firearms related analyses and thousands of additional hours of research and study in the lab.
Thank you so much for covering all that. Easiest question I've ever asked. Have you been qualified as an expert witness?
I have.
How many times?
To date, it's been 145 in both local and federal courts.
So when you say local, do you mean the 4th Judicial District here?
I do, as well as the 18th.
So up in Arapahoe, Douglas County areas?
Douglas, yes.
Okay. Your Honor, based on her excellent answer on her qualifications, I would move to have her qualified as an expert witness as a firearms examiner.
Defense?
No objection.
Witness will be so qualified. Go ahead.
So let's get some groundwork stuff out of the way, just so that we're all talking the same language. You mentioned tool marks. Tell the jury what we mean when we talk about tool marks as it relates to firearms.
Tool marks as it relates to firearms. In this particular instance, we would be talking about the firearm acting as the tool. And that firearm has a series of components, like the barrel, for example, that impart different markings on the surfaces of the fired ammunition components, like the cartridge cases and bullets. So the tool marks are produced by the firearm on the surface of the bullets and cartridge cases.
And then when we're talking about a cartridge or a bullet, tell the jury what we are talking about there.
I'd be happy to. Would it be all right to use the demonstrative piece?
Yes, did you bring your
I
demonstrative?
did.
So yeah, go ahead and bring that out. It's just a demonstrative of a bullet components.
Correct. So this is just a large plastic demonstrative piece. It depicts, rather, a cartridge of ammunition in its unfired state. When a cartridge of ammunition is fired, the firing pin component of the firearm contacts this silver portion right here, the primer. The primer contains a shock-sensitive material that, when it's struck, ignites a powder charge that's located inside the body of the cartridge. As that powder charge burns, there's a very rapid buildup of gases, and it's those gases that are responsible for forcing the bullet down the barrel of the firearm and almost simultaneously forcing the action of the firearm open so that the cartridge case, or the empty piece after it's been fired, can be extracted and ejected or kicked out of the chamber of the firearm, readying the firearm to be loaded the next time. So the cartridge ends up in 2 pieces. We have a bullet or a projectile. Sometimes fragments or pieces of the bullet and projectile are recovered. And then we have the cartridge case.
In the way that you're describing using that particular demonstrative, is that for a semi-automatic firearm?
That general description would cover most firearms, but semi-automatic would fit in that.
And then as far as handguns go, tell the jury the difference between a revolver and a semi-automatic.
So with a semi-automatic handgun, and to be clear, when we're speaking in those terms, semi-automatic means 1 cartridge of ammunition is fired for each pull of the trigger. With a semi-automatic firearm, the primary difference, other than the way it looks, but in terms of its function, is the cartridge case is extracted and ejected and often found left behind. With respect to a revolver, the cartridges of ammunition are loaded into a cylinder, and those fired cartridge cases remain in that cylinder until the operator chooses to manually remove them.
As it relates to this particular case, did you have a chance to review items that were recovered from autopsy?
I did.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
I'm going to start out by showing you People's 89 that was previously admitted by Holly Smith, a crime scene technician from Florida. Did you have a chance to look at that item?
I did not evaluate this specific item.
Okay. Those little plastic red tips, do you recognize what those are?
They appear to be consistent with the polymer plugs that are incorporated into various hollow point designs of bullets.
Did you send over some pictures to give us an example so that the jury understands what we're talking about, the polymer plugs?
I did.
And, at this time, I'd ask for permission to publish 2 demonstrative photos of Hornady rounds of ammunition that show that polymer plug.
Has the defense seen these?
Yes, they have. And
Is there an objection?
No.
All right. Go ahead.
we're pulling them up now. So this is the first, just please describe what we're talking about there.
Sure. This is an actual live cartridge of Hornady ammunition. You'll see the projectile or the bullet is the copper colored portion sticking out at this side here. The cartridge case is the silver or nickel colored portion on this side here. You can see in this profile picture, the nose of the bullet located right here has a material that's placed inside. This particular type of bullet is referred to as a hollow point bullet. It's a bullet designed to expand when it comes into contact with tissue. That expansion is to facilitate staying within the target at the time it enters. It's also to facilitate a larger wound tract.
Does that mean basically that the bullet head is the way I'll say it, expands so that it has more friction?
It opens up, looks very much like a mushroom. It's actually called mushrooming. So the top of that opens up like flower petals and it increases the diameter of that projectile.
Okay, and if we could pull up the next demonstrative. Tell the jury what we're looking at there.
This is a photo looking down at that same cartridge. So now instead of looking at it like this, you're looking at it from this way. And it's just capturing an example of what that polymer plug that some ammunition companies utilize. That polymer plug is designed to prevent that hollow point cavity from filling up with other materials, preventing the expansion of that bullet when it comes into contact with tissue.
And then the item that I put on the, that I just handed you, People's Exhibit 89, those plastic red tips, is that consistent with what we're looking at in this demonstrative exhibit that would prevent the round from being plugged as it's fired through something?
Yes, they do appear to be consistent with that.
Okay. I'm going to retrieve that. With your job as a firearms examiner, were you asked to examine some firearms in this particular case?
I was.
What exactly were you asked to examine for this case?
I was asked to look at 3 different firearms, complete mechanical functioning examinations on those firearms. So an examination to determine whether or not they work and whether or not they work the way the manufacturer intended. And then to evaluate those firearms for comparison to recovered bullets.
So tell the jury which types of firearms you were asked to examine.
The first firearm that I have listed was a FMK Model 9 C1G2 9mm pistol. The second firearm, and this is really in no particular order, the second firearm was a Smith & Wesson M&P Bodyguard caliber .380 auto pistol. And the third pistol was a Smith & Wesson M&P 9C 9mm Luger pistol.
So when we're talking about those 3 different firearms, are 2 of those 9mm and then one is a .380 caliber?
That's correct.
Tell the jury the difference between 9mm and .380.
The primary difference is going to be the size of the cartridge that those fire. The .380 auto is going to be a lower velocity, smaller cartridge.
Okay. And then as it relates to, I just put the box and an envelope up there, People's 484 and 485 that were just admitted through crime scene investigator Christian Lure. Did you have a chance to look at those items?
Yes, I did.
Is that the same as what you just described as the Smith & Wesson M&P? I'm sorry, not the Smith & Wesson M&P, the Smith & Wesson model M&P 9C 9mm?
Yes, it is.
Is that one of the, so that's one of the weapons that you tested?
It is.
What did you determine as relates to whether that was a functioning firearm?
I was able to determine that this was an operable firearm capable of causing serious injury or death, and I did not note any abnormalities in its function.
Okay. So when you test that, do you actually test fire that weapon?
Yes, I do.
Or may I approach with people 713?
May.
You recognize 713?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize it?
I recognize it from the label that I created when I created these items, as well as my dates and initials on the seal.
Is it in the same or substantially the same condition today as when you packaged this up?
It is.
And I move for admission of people 713.
Defense. Exhibit 713 will be admitted. Go ahead.
So when you do a test fire, what do you do? How do you do that to compare maybe rounds or projectiles that are found in an investigation to what you're test firing?
Once I have documented all of the identifying characteristics of the firearm, like the make, the model, the serial number, and the caliber of ammunition it's designed to fire, the final step in confirming function is to load that with the appropriate caliber ammunition and actually fire it.
Okay. And then once you have an expelled round from your test fires, what do you do with that expelled round?
I recover those cartridge cases and the bullets. The bullets are fired into a giant steel tank full of water. That water serves to slow those bullets down gently and without imparting any additional markings or details on the surface of those bullets. So when I recover them from the water and I look at them, I know that any marks produced on the surface of those bullets are solely produced from the barrel of the firearm that I just fired them through. I recover those bullets from the water tank as well as the cartridge cases, and those now become an item of evidence in the case.
And is that what we have in 713?
It is both the test fired bullets, the test fired cartridge cases, and a silicone cast of this barrel.
So tell us about a silicone cast of the barrel. What does that mean?
The barrel of firearms, when we do comparison and evaluation, has to be looked at for the types of markings that are present inside the barrel, the types of tool markings that were produced when it was manufactured. It's those different markings inside the barrel that are then transferred to the surfaces of the bullet when it's pushed through the barrel of the firearm. And it forms more or less a signature of a particular firearm. I cast the barrel of these firearms after I complete my test firing so that I can evaluate those markings and determine if they're going to be suitable for comparison and identification purposes.
Does this process allow you to potentially compare a projectile that kills somebody to your test fire to see if the gun that you test fired is the same gun that was used to kill the person?
It certainly could be done for that purpose. It's also very often done for the purpose of eliminating a gun as a possibility.
So let's talk about eliminating. You mentioned those other two firearms that you tested, that 380 caliber handgun, the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard, and then the FMK model 9C1G2. Did you test fire those weapons?
I did.
Were they functional weapons?
Excuse me. Yes, they did operate as they were intended.
And were those capable of causing serious bodily injury or death?
They were.
Did you test or compare the test fired rounds from those two guns to projectiles that were recovered in this investigation?
I did perform that evaluation.
Were you able to determine whether those were used to fire those projectiles, or did you eliminate those weapons from being used in this case?
I was able to eliminate both of those firearms as potential sources of those bullets.
Okay, I'm going to approach and show you People's Exhibits 103 and 88. I want to start with People's number 103, which was previously admitted by crime scene technician Kelly Smith from Florida, two projectiles that were recovered from a pillow.
Okay.
Had you had a chance to look at those two items?
I did.
Were you able to compare your test fire rounds from this particular firearm sitting up there with you today to those particular projectiles?
I was.
What does that analysis tell us?
In this particular instance, I was able to conclude that one of the bullets in People's Exhibit 103 was fired in the Smith & Wesson pistol, 9mm pistol, People's Exhibit 484. The other bullet had similar general characteristics, but due to the damaged condition of that particular bullet, I was not able to make a conclusive identification in that instance.
So let's talk about that just a little bit. If like you described there, damage, what can cause damage to a projectile that would make it difficult for you to conclude that it came from the same weapon?
The first issue to contend with is any of the target surfaces that bullet travels through. So anything it travels through has the ability to impart additional damage to the surfaces that may obliterate the markings that were left behind by the firearm. In this particular instance, the extended period of exposure to biological substances also left significant damage in the form of corrosion, if you will, on the surfaces of these bullets. And in this case, the first projectile that I discussed, I was able to clean up well enough to be able to still visualize the tool marks from the barrel. In the second circumstance, it just simply was no longer in suitable condition.
Okay, and then when we talk about People's Exhibit 88, which was previously admitted again by crime scene technician Kelly Smith from Florida, projectile recovered at autopsy. Did you have a chance to look at that item?
I did.
What did your analysis of that item tell you?
I was able to conclude that bullet was also fired in the Smith & Wesson pistol, People's Exhibit 484.
Meaning that the pistol that's in the box in front of you was fired and struck Gannon and was recovered in Gannon's autopsy.
That bullet was fired through that pistol, yes.
Okay. We also have some photographs. Before you got on the stand with the photos.
I can assist you.
Matt, are you looking for any of these up here? Mr. Allen,
Yes, sir.
are you looking for that stack there?
So those were previously submitted. All right. Approaching you with People's Exhibit 680, 681, and 682. Recognize those photos?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize them?
These are photographs that I took using the comparison microscope when I was making the comparisons of the evidence bullets to the test fired bullets from the Smith & Wesson pistol.
Will these exhibits help explain the way that you do your examination of your test fired rounds to the known rounds or the rounds recovered in this case?
They do.
Are they fair and accurate representations as to what you saw when you performed your analysis?
Yes, they are.
I'd move for admission of People's Exhibit 680, 681, and 682.
Mr. Cook? Exhibit 680, 81, and 82 will be admitted. Go ahead.
In permission to publish?
You may.
I think you just turned the screen off, Judge.
I did.
Okay.
Let me know when you're there. I didn't want to have anything else appear. That's it.
So you've got presenter mode. So you need to slide that back over to our side. It's, yeah. We'll just work through this. So we've got six, go back, please. There we go. So this, the main picture in the center of the screen, my eyes are getting bad, so I can't read the exhibit number when it's smaller like that. Does that say 680?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so tell the jury what we're looking at in People's Exhibit 680.
So People's Exhibit 680 is a photograph of one of the bullets that I received for comparison purposes. To me, at the time, it was known as item 727. This photograph is taken using a camera that's hooked up to the comparison microscope. The comparison microscope is simply a large scope that has one set of eyepieces to look through and two stages. So when I mount items on those stages and look through the eyepieces, I can see both of those items simultaneously side by side. And I can increase the magnification at varying levels as I work through the analysis to look at those different tool marks that are present. In this instance, what you're looking at here is the hollow point bullet expanded. So when we talked about the mushrooming effect, that's what you see here. This is the nose that opened up, and this is the base of the bullet here. And in this photograph, it's just documenting the overall condition of the projectile, as well as one of the land impressions that I evaluated.
What is, just so we understand it, what's that opaque blob in the front of the bullet?
This material right here is just a sticky wax substance that I use to hold the bullet in place so that I can turn it and rotate it on the microscope as I work through all the different surfaces.
In this particular exhibit 680, can you point out some of the tool marks that we talked about earlier on this particular item?
I can. So in this particular area right here, this thing that looks like tracks right in the center, that's what's known as a land impression. The area above it right here and the area below it right here is what's known as a groove impression. Those are lands and grooves are high spots and low spots that are formed into the barrel of a firearm. They're formed in a particular number and with a twist to either direct the bullet to spin to the right or spin to the left when it's fired. The purpose of rifling is for spin stabilization. It allows that bullet to travel in the straightest possible distance for the longest amount of time accurately. It's very much like throwing a spiral football down a field as opposed to just lobbing it out there. Those markings are impressed then onto the surface of this bullet as it passes down the barrel of the firearm.
Okay, and then if we can move on to 681. What are we looking at in 681?
681 depicts only one photograph of many that were taken during the comparison process. And what you see here is item that was known to me as item 727, so one of the evidence bullets. There's a black line that runs down the center here separating the two images. And on the left-hand side is a portion of the test-fired bullet that I generated using the Smith & Wesson pistol, People's Exhibit 484. And what I'm capturing in this photograph is the overall size dimension correspondence, as well as an area of detail that I'm interested in right in through here. And then there was some additional detail in through here.
When you say the item that you understood as number 727, what specifically, for your purposes, is item 727?
727 was the bullet that was recovered from the victim at autopsy.
Okay, thank you. And then if we can go on to 682. Tell the jury what we're looking at in 682.
People's Exhibit 682 is essentially the exact same photograph that you just saw previously. Test fire on the left, evidence bullet on the right, only now it's a much higher magnification of this area of the projectile here. And I'm looking at these lines that run through the center line and correspond to one another. As I work through my comparison, I look at all of those different surfaces of the bullet, either observing the agreement or disagreement that's present so that I can render my conclusion.
Was there agreement or disagreement in these two images?
In these two images, there was agreement not only here, but additional agreement that was captured up here and in other areas. As you evaluate those photographs for yourself, keep in mind that this photograph is taken of a curved surface and the camera sits right above the curved surface. So there's only a small area that's in focus when I'm completing this evaluation. So the stuff that you see that starts to phase out of focus is not necessarily in misalignment. It's simply not the area being focused on for the photograph.
Again, does this photo show that the item recovered from autopsy came from this same gun?
This was one of many photos taken that depict that, yes.
Okay. You can go ahead and take the photos down now. What I would like to have you do at this point is using People's Exhibit number 484, if you could just open that up and show the jury. When this particular type of firearm is fired, just explain the mechanism and what happens with a shell casing.
So I'll first point out that People's Exhibit 40 is secured not only into the box, but it has a gun lock running through the action of the firearm. So in its current state, I can see the chamber is open, there's no ammunition present, and it is completely safe. It could not be fired in this condition. So what you're looking at is a pistol that is not fully open or closed. When this firearm is loaded for use, the magazine is inserted into the grip located right here. It's the piece that the lock is running through. The slide, which is this top portion up here, is pulled to the rearward position and allowed to move forward again. And when that occurs, the slide pushes a cartridge of ammunition from the top of the magazine into the chamber of the firearm, or this rearmost portion of the barrel. That action also cocks this firearm and it's readied for firing. To actuate firing, the operator would pull the trigger of the firearm and that would send the firing pin into the primer component, into the primer component of the cartridge and detonate that primer component so that firing can occur. The bullet will travel down the barrel of the firearm and the action or the slide will be forced rearward so that that cartridge case can be extracted and ejected and the next round can be placed in the chamber of the pistol.
So when that particular type of firearm is fired, it kicks the shell casing out like in your demonstrative exhibit of your bullet.
It does if it's operating properly and if nothing is impeding movement of that slide.
When a shell casing is kicked out of a firearm like that, do they pile up in a nice, neat little pile?
Not necessarily. It very much depends on what surfaces those cartridge cases may hit as they exit the firearm. For example, if you're in a room and there's furniture or walls or ceilings present, those cartridge cases may hit those surfaces and they can bounce all over the place. Conversely, if you're outdoors and you're standing on a nice fluffy bed of grass, as that cartridge case exits the firearm and lands in the grass, it may rest where it lays. So its terminal point may be very consistent.
Is there any such thing as a disintegrating shell casing? Meaning that if a firearm is fired like this, that a shell casing doesn't come out or it just disappears?
I'm not aware of one just disappearing. I'm aware of them perhaps not coming out of the firearm, but not disappearing.
Okay, so that's all I have. Thank you.
Cross-examination?
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm well. Thank you.
So can you look at the exhibit with the pistol in the cardboard box again? Of course. That are firearms or handguns, semi-automatic handguns, are they like a shotgun that's a semi-automatic where they're left-handed and right-handed shotguns? Are there left-handed and right-handed pistols?
Are we speaking in terms of the direction it ejects?
Yes.
Yes, there are.
Examining that one there, would that be a pistol that is shot by a left-handed or a right-handed person?
I should say that it could be fired by either a left-handed or a right-handed person, but I will state that it ejects the cartridge case if it's being held in its conventional proper manner. It ejects the cartridge case to the right.
Okay. So more than likely, this would be a pistol that was shot by somebody that was right-handed. Cartridge goes off, is ejected to the right, so it's not going across the shooter's field of vision.
I would object as to speculation. He's asking to speculate as to the handedness of the shooter.
Well, I will allow him to rephrase the question because at one point he was talking about if it's in your left hand, the shell is going to be ejected over your field of vision. So I will allow that.
What do you base your opinion on as far as that's a left or right-handed pistol?
So I would not refer to it as either a left or right-handed pistol. I would simply address it in terms of what direction it ejects the cartridge case. And handedness, as far as shooters go, is one element to consider with respect to whether or not they want it ejecting to the right or left. But the other factor to consider is whether they're using their right or their left eye predominantly for sighting.
Okay. Well, let's say, generally speaking, a right-handed shooter is right eye dominant. That pistol there is going to eject the shells in a right direction.
That is correct.
Okay, so if I'm holding a pistol, my finger pistol, it's deadly, watch out. If I'm right-handed holding my pistol in the right hand, the shells from that are going to eject out away from my body.
That's correct. They will come this direction, so they will not cross over you.
Okay, if I have a semi-automatic pistol that is associated with more of a left-hand favorable shooter's ejection, if I'm holding that with the right hand, it's going to eject to the left, and it's a semi-automatic pistol, so you can shoot more than one time, correct?
That's correct.
I'm going to have cartridges ejecting across my line of sight.
That is correct. If this ejected from the left side of the pistol and I'm right eye focused, it's going to eject this direction.
And having spent shell casings, if I'm shooting more than one time going across my line of sight, might not be optimal optimal shooting and aiming conditions to have stuff going right across my face.
For aiming purposes, yes.
Okay, so if you had somebody that was left eye dominant and a shooter that was left-handed, it would probably be better to have a semi-automatic pistol that ejects to the left.
If I were that shooter, that is how I would prefer the design.
Okay. So did you say that is a pistol that ejects to the right?
Yes, it is.
And so that would be a pistol that would favor a right-handed shooter, right eye dominant.
That's how I would prefer it if I were the shooter.
Okay. Now, may I approach the witness? You can put that back. Thank you. May I approach? That's what it is.
This one?
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as People's Exhibit 713. So the two, if you can look at this, you have the actual bullet, the part that comes out of the shell. There's three of them there. Are those two that were recovered from the pillow and one that was your test fire, or are those all three test fires from the different pistols?
These are all three test fires from the one Smith & Wesson pistol. So they're all three samples from the same pistol.
Okay, so and that was the 9mm Smith & Wesson?
Correct.
Okay, so you did three test fires from there. Do you have the bullets, or can you get the exhibit with the two bullets that were pulled from the pillow?
That would be exhibit 103.
Sure. Well, I'll take your word for it, Judge, because I can't find it. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, exhibit 103. Now, where is one of the bullets in this that was pulled from a pillow? There were two bullets.
Both of them. So this one here and this one here.
This one here and this one here.
Yes.
And which one was the bullet that came from the deceased boy?
That one is People's Exhibit 88.
Okay. All right. And it looks like there's a lot of, it looks like there's deformation or the bullets fragmenting in all three of them, correct?
They are definitely deformed to various degrees, yes.
Okay, but the one that was pulled out of the individual looks to be more deformed than the bullets that were pulled out of the pillow.
Yes, I would say the nose is more fully expanded and there's slightly more deformation in that one, yes.
Okay. And if you know this, great. If not, that's fine. Would you expect two 9mm hollow points? It looks like they were Hornady, manufacturer of the shells. Would you expect those bullets to actually penetrate through the pillow?
If they went through nothing else,
Yes.
just the pillow,
Yeah.
I would expect a 9mm of this design to go through the pillow.
Okay. And is it your information that the two rounds that came from the pillow, it looks like in your report it says source or it mentions pillow. Do you know if they went through anything else other than the pillow?
I do not. I can simply state that they have hard impact damage that suggests something other than the pillow came into contact with these items.
Okay. Do you think that these two bullets, just a second, Your Honor. Do you have any idea what that could have been? That the two bullets that were not pulled from the individual, what they could have impacted based on the history and what information you were giving for this analysis?
I would say based on the history and information, no. Based on some of the trace evidence that I observed present on the bullet and stuck in the bullet, there was evidence of it having passed through biological substances. So there was evidence of possible bone and possible hairs present on the surfaces of those bullets.
Okay. So can you tell the distance that the two bullets that were recovered from the pillow, how far away those bullets were when they were, or how far the shooter was away when those bullets were fired?
I cannot, in this instance, I did not have the opportunity to evaluate the pillow and there was no distance testing performed.
Okay. And were you aware that the pillow was actually taken into evidence and recovered?
I was aware of very little more than these were recovered from every pillow.
Okay. Would it have been a benefit to you in your analyses to have had the pillow where the bullets came from, to examine it and possibly do separate test fires into that pillow?
The only time that would have come into play for me is if there had been testing requested to determine how far away those surfaces were when they were shot into.
Okay. Was any of this biological material from the two bullets that were recovered from the pillow, was any of this biological material tested or collected to be submitted for DNA analysis or any type of work like that?
It was most certainly collected by me when I evaluated the bullets. I preserved that evidence in case additional testing was warranted on them. I am not aware if any further testing was undertaken after I collected it.
Okay, but you felt it was important enough to at least collect it and preserve it.
Certainly important to preserve it, especially considering that my handling would have obstructed it and destroyed it during my process. So it was important to preserve that in case it became necessary for testing down the line.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Redirect.
Thank you, Ron. Ms. Happ, when you were talking about shell casings ejecting out of the right or left, would you say that, well, you tell us, are most guns manufactured to kick to the right?
The large majority are manufactured with a right-hand ejection, yes.
Does it require some special hunting to find a gun that will kick off to the left?
Sometimes special hunting, there are a few manufacturers, if you want your firearm in that configuration, that you might seek out specifically, or you can consider purchasing a different slide for that firearm to allow that function.
In your opinion, as an expert, is it common for a weapon like this that the shell casings kick to the right can be handled equally as effectively by either a right or left-handed person,
Yes, it can.
or a right eye or left eye dominant person?
It can.
Were you aware that the shell casings recovered from that pillow were in a suitcase with a decomposing body?
I became aware of that later, yes.
Could that have been contributing to some of the biological substances that you found on those two those two projectiles?
That certainly contributed to some of it, yes.
And then as it relates to other types of scientific testing, is it very common or not very common to find fingerprints on bullets?
On fired bullets?
Yeah.
It would be very uncommon to find that after a bullet passes through the barrel. Theoretically, the way that would work is the fingerprint would be deposited before it was fired. Then that bullet is going to pass down the barrel of the firearm. And as that happens, the action of the bullet rubbing in the inside of the barrel would obliterate the fingerprint. Further, if anything should sustain the firing process, as it goes into that target surface, again, that bullet will be wiped clean of whatever was present on it, fingerprint-wise.
What about on shell casings?
On shell casings, there's a greater likelihood that fingerprints can be recovered on shell casings. One, because this casing doesn't go through anything after it's been fired. However, there are elements of contact with the cartridge case and the body of the cartridge case inside the chamber of the firearm that may obliterate that. There's also a heat buildup that occurs when firing happens that may affect the cartridge case as well. So typically when we're successful with recovering fingerprints on fired cartridge cases, it's because they've been picked up afterwards and moved.
What about, can you find fingerprints on shell casings that are never found in an investigation?
No, that would be a definite no.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for us? pass it forward and. Ms. Happ, did any of the three pistols you examined eject from the left?
They did not. All three of these ejected to the right of the firearm.
I'm going to ask this question. Let me know if you think it's outside your area of expertise. If someone is left eye dominant and a shell ejects across your field of vision, would that cause someone to miss?
So in that regard, I would say there's a couple things to consider. The first thing is that first shot that's fired, nothing will be obstructing your vision. We would be talking about subsequent shot fired after that. And we would be talking about subsequent shots fired in rapid succession, meaning not a shot. That cartridge case ejection is quick. So the shot is fired, the cartridge case ejects and falls often much faster than the shooter can recognize. Where that becomes a more serious consideration is firing of multiple cartridges where those shells are constantly running in front of the shooter's field of vision. I hope that covers it.
I will allow reasonable follow-up as to those questions only. Prosecution?
Are there a lot of factors that can go into accuracy of a shooter?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you list off some of those?
The firearm is one. Whether or not that shooter is practiced is a primary. It's probably the biggest.
Can left eye dominant shooters with a gun that kicks off to the right be very accurate in their shots?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Cook?
Thank you.
Ms. Happ, you may step down. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to clean up the witness stand, Judge, before the next witness.
All right. You can call your next witness, please.
Thanks, Judge. We'd call Brooke Bell to the stand.
Ms. Bell, if you would step forward and raise your right hand, please, ma'am. Do you swear affirm the testimony about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
Go ahead and have a seat in the witness stand. Please watch your step as you step into the stand. Mr. Young?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Brooke Bell, and my last name is spelled B-E-L-L.
What's your occupation?
I am a senior crime scene investigator with the Colorado Springs Metro Crime Lab.
And how long have you been a senior crime scene investigator?
I've been a crime scene investigator since July of 2017, so almost 6 years.
How'd you become a senior crime scene investigator?
So the senior position requires a minimum of at least 5 years of experience. It requires a crime scene certification in one of 3 levels through the International Association for Identification. And it also requires a certain number of training hours towards specializing in an additional forensic discipline.
So other than your experience, do you also have training and educational experience with regards to your occupation?
I do. In terms of education, I graduated magna cum laude with a Bachelor of Arts degree in biology. and a Master of Science degree in Forensic Science, both from the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs. And in terms of training, I did participate in an internal training program through the Metro Crime Lab. I was on call 24/7 for a period of 6 months, so a lot of exposure to various types of crime scenes and documentation techniques during that time. I was required to complete relevant readings, perform practical exercises, and I worked with a qualified crime scene investigator until it was determined that I could process crime scenes independently and any of the related tasks. So in addition to completing that internal training program, throughout my career, I've also had the opportunity to participate in ongoing formal training and education. So I've received training courses in crime scene investigation, crime scene reconstruction, trajectory documentation, shooting incident reconstruction, bloodstain pattern analysis, chemical enhancement of blood, photography, latent print processing, just to name some of those more specific areas related to crime scene processing.
And have you been qualified to give expert testimony as a crime scene investigator in El Paso County?
Yes, I have.
Any other jurisdictions?
I have also testified as an expert witness in federal court.
Approximately how many times have you been qualified?
I've testified 34 times and been qualified as an expert 22 times.
At this time, we'd ask that the court allow Ms. Bell to testify as an expert in the field of crime scene investigation.
Defense? The witness will be so qualified. Go ahead.
Tell us about crime scene investigation. What does that mean? I mean, we've seen CSI on TV. Is that the kind of thing we're talking about? And then we'll talk about whether or not that actually happens once we get into your testimony.
So as a crime scene investigator, my primary responsibility is to document and process crime scenes, and ultimately I'm responsible for the identification, collection, and preservation of the evidence for any type of future testing and to assist with investigative leads. It certainly may look very different than what you see on TV and typically takes a lot longer.
So you just can't walk in a room and then all of a sudden know exactly what happens in that room?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay. As part of as a crime scene investigator, do you attend meetings with detectives and police officers and other members of a particular investigation to get an idea of what you're looking for when you go to a crime scene?
So the most common situation is the information we receive is what we refer to as a briefing. So we just receive preliminary information that detectives or the sergeants, law enforcement personnel have regarding the case up to the point that we become involved with the case.
And I would imagine that it's beneficial to have some idea of what you're going to when you go to a crime scene before you start that investigation. Is that fair?
That is the most common situation. We tend to have an idea of what type of investigation or what type of crime has occurred when we respond. That is not always the case, though.
I'm going to talk about this case and this investigation. On January 29th of 2020, were you asked to go to 6727?
6627, I believe.
627. You think I'd had memorized by now, but 6627 Mandan Drive to search a residence.
Yes, I was.
What kind of information did you have prior to that and prior to that search on January 29th, 2020?
So the initial information that I received prior to responding to the residence was that an 11-year-old child had gone missing 2 days prior to my request to respond and document or search the residence where he lived. And the only information I was provided at that time was that the investigators had reason to believe that he may be the victim of a homicide. I didn't receive any additional information until I responded to the residence, where I received that case briefing that I mentioned previously. And that was just kind of more of a timeline of events in terms of what the detectives knew up to that point.
And what was that? What was the briefing that you received when you arrived at the residence?
So I responded, it was Wednesday, January 29th. So at that point, the 11-year-old child who was identified to me as Gannon Stauch had been missing for 2 days. I had received information that he had reportedly gone to a friend's house and didn't return home and was reported missing that Monday around 7 p.m. and that sheriffs with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office had responded around 10 p.m. that evening. I was also informed that the following day, so Tuesday the 28th, the sheriff's office had sent investigative personnel to do a search of the residence. Part of the information that they had and that they passed on to me was that an incident, as it was called, had occurred on the 26th in which Gannon was playing video games in the basement living room. And a candle was knocked over, damaged the carpet and a couch in the basement. They had informed me there was a section of carpet down in the basement that had been burned and cut away down to the padding. And so that it was suspicious in nature. It had been covered with carpet and an area rug.
Did you receive any information about a potential sexual assault or kidnapping on the 29th of January?
So I did a little bit further once I'd been on scene for a little bit longer. I believe it was possibly during our walkthrough. The information that they provided to me was that Gannon's stepmother, who was identified to me as Letecia Stauch, had contacted an individual about the carpet repair, and that individual came to the house and she was sexually assaulted in Gannon's bedroom, and that Gannon had been kidnapped.
And so did that change at least your game plan on how you're going to process that crime scene based on this new information that comes in?
So with the information I had on this very first response, the areas that I'm focused on is the downstairs living room, where this area of carpet has been burned down to the padding, or basically down to the subfloor, which is unusual and had been cut out and removed. And then with this possible sexual assault information, so that was some new information, and having a location, that told me that I was going to search for evidence that might be potentially related to that in that bedroom.
And so what kind of evidence would you be looking for based on that?
So when we're, in the case of a sexual assault, we use what's called an alternate light source and filtered goggles. And so we actually will check the room for possible biological fluids. Certain biological fluids will fluoresce or glow under ALS. And those tend to be biological fluids such as urine, saliva, and then semen. So in the case of a sexual assault, we're using that so that we can try and identify potentially semen.
Had you learned that the residents had at least initially been searched the night before on January 28th, 2020 by some El Paso County detectives?
Yes, I had been informed that they had conducted a separate search prior to the involvement of the Metro Crime Lab, and that there were some evidence items collected during that search.
And so were you at least the first time a CSI lab personnel entered the residence to conduct the search?
Yes, so I was one of the first responding CSIs.
And Your Honor, just to kind of speed things up a little bit, there's going to be no objections to the following exhibits.
Okay.
373 through 441.
Okay.
And 711.
And defense, do you agree?
I do.
All right, then exhibits 373 through 441 are admitted, and so is 711. Go ahead.
And it's a combination of photographs, mostly photographs, but also physical exhibits, Your Honor. And we'll,
Okay.
as we go through the photographs, we'll get the physical exhibits.
Okay.
If we could start with People's Exhibit 373, please. Publishing it.
Yep.
And if I may approach the witness,
You may.
Ms. Bell, I'll give you the pictures and you can either use the pictures to look at or
Thank
the
you.
two TV screens that we have. And then you got a fancy pointer up here somewhere.
Is that what this is?
It's hosting. So what do we see in People's Exhibit 373?
People's Exhibit 373 is a photograph that was taken of the exterior of Mandan Street. If we're looking to the left side of the photograph, we can actually see the Metro Crime Lab van, which was parked in front of 6627.
So what direction are we facing here with this photograph?
We are mostly looking east, slightly southeast.
And so could you use the pointer and point out 6627 Mandan?
May I stand, Your Honor?
You may go ahead. You can step down if you would like to.
Thank you. 6627 would be this residence right here, and it had a bright yellow chair on the porch.
And the first house that we see on the right photograph, is that 6643 Mandan?
I wouldn't be able to tell from the photograph in terms of reading the address.
Okay. If we can go to 674 now. What do we see in 674? 374. I'm all over the place. 374.
So People's Exhibit 374 is a direct photograph of the front of the residence 6627. And we can see that bright yellow chair that I had previously mentioned.
We go 375 now. What are we looking at 375?
People's Exhibit 375, and I don't recall just from seeing this image if this is, I believe it's from immediately inside the entry. So if we walked in the door, that it would be one of the walls on the side.
Would this be the laundry room area?
It's possible. I can't really tell from seeing the rest of it, but it's possible.
Okay. If you look to the right-hand corner, top corner, would that be the entry to the garage?
Yes, it would be. So with that being said, then this would be the entry into the house through the garage, which was first the laundry room.
We can go to 376 now, please. What do we see in 376?
So People's Exhibit 376 is, and I don't know if this is the washer or the dryer, but in the bottom of the photograph, we see the red. And there were a pair of tennis shoes. So they're black with white soles turned over on top. And part of my walkthrough and briefing information I had received was that when the sheriff's deputies responded on the 28th, they had observed possible stains on the bottom of these shoes and had collected swabs of those stains.
And did you say that was done on the previous night, January 28th?
That's correct. So when I mentioned they had collected some evidence on that first response, that was one of those items.
377, please. Is this a close-up of the same shoes?
Yes, it is.
And then, Your Honor, 378 are the actual shoes. And just for the jury's benefit, we're going to be opening those with another witness.
Okay.
So we're not going to be opening those at this time.
All right.
We can go to 379 now. What do we see in People's Exhibit 379?
So People's Exhibit 379 is a photograph inside the garage. And if we look in the upper left-hand corner, we can actually see the door that's open, and that's what opens into the laundry room.
Now, on January 29th, were you looking for blood in this particular garage?
Not initially. However, it was brought to our attention when a deputy had responded that while we were working on documentation in the basement, that he had located some stains that he believed to be possible blood stains.
We can go to 380 now, please. What do we see in People's Exhibit 380?
People's Exhibit 380, we've actually moved further into the garage, so now we're closer to the entry door. And there are actually 3 sticker scales present in this photograph that were placed to identify those possible blood stains that were located by the deputy.
Could you please point those out for the
I
jury?
will, yes.
And Mr. Young, could you find a reasonable breaking point in the next 5 minutes or so?
We could stop now if you like, Judge.
Okay.
Whatever you're.
You can go ahead and answer that question, and then we'll take that
Okay.
break.
And is it okay? May I stand again? Thank you. So when we look in the middle stair in the garage right here, we can see a sticker that was actually identifying a possible blood stain that we labeled A. And then we have 2 more on the floor. So possible blood stain B and possible blood stain C.
All right. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we will take we'll take another recess for about 10 minutes. If I can have everyone back in the jury room a little bit before 4 o'clock, we should be able to start right on time at that point. Don't discuss case among yourselves. Don't discuss case with anyone else. With that, all rise for the jury, please. Thank you. You may all be seated. Record should reflect the jury has left the courtroom. Court will be in recess until 4 o'clock.
All rise.
Court will call 20 CR 1358, People versus Letecia Stauch. Record should reflect the jury's not present in the courtroom. I want to alert the attorneys to a juror issue. And we can either discuss it now, we can discuss it at the end of the day. I don't know what you want to do. All I know is that a juror has alerted me that it wasn't until Ms. Happ was on the stand that she realized she knew her. She did not recognize the name as she was looking through the witness list. So I don't know anything about how she knows her or anything like that. My thought was I would bring her in, ask her a couple of questions, and then send her back, and you can make a decision as to whether or not want to make a challenge, or we go from there. We can either do that before this witness continues her testimony. We can wait until we get closer to the end of the day. What do you want to do?
I think it'd be good to do that towards the end of the day, Judge.
Okay.
Maybe save a little bit of time at the end of the day to handle.
That's fine. All right. So let's stop at like 10 till. Stop your questioning there, and then we will bring that juror in, and we'll go from there. Does that work for juror 12? Third one over in the front. Yeah, well, she's in seat 13, but she's juror 12 because we only have 9 in the back. So, okay. Okay, in light of that, let's bring the jurors in then. All rise for the jury, please. Thank you. You may all be seated. Court will recall 20 CR 1358, People versus Letecia Stauch. Record should reflect the jury has returned to the courtroom. When we took our break, we were in the midst of the direct examination of Ms. Bell. That's where we will resume.
So, Ms. Bell, we still have People's Exhibit 380 up on the TV screen. With regards to these placards A, B, and C that you just pointed out prior to the break, are they in direction from the door to where there are some, looks like some 2x4s on the ground there?
So if you're referring to the lower left corner of the photograph, yes, there are some long 2x4s in that area of the garage.
And when we looked at the picture of the entire garage, is that a space where a vehicle may be parked?
Typically, it appeared to be where you'd pull a vehicle in, yes.
Now, also on People's Exhibit 380, do you see any softball equipment in there or items related to softball?
If we look to where the stairs are, there's a blue bucket over on the right hand side of that photograph. There appears to be yellow softballs inside that blue bucket.
And on the left side of the photograph, there appears to be some kind of bag that says Easton or, right?
Yes, on the left side of the photograph on top of the green box.
We go now to 381, please. What do we see in 381?
People's Exhibit 381 is actually a photograph taken standing inside the laundry room, so we can see the tile floor, looking down at the stairs. And in the center of the photograph, we can see that sticker scale that I mentioned previously, and that was the placard A, so the possible blood stains that were observed there.
And just so Christian Luer just testified, he processed this garage on February 3rd. Obviously, you did this on January 29th. You do the blue star in the garage at that time, or did you note this blood just from your naked eye?
So this was visible blood, so it was documented because we could see it without any type of chemical processing. And when I responded, I did not do or use Blue Star in the garage.
And so we can go to 382 now. What do we see in People's Exhibit 382?
People's Exhibit 382 is a close-up photograph of the possible blood stains identified using placard A.
Ready to do some more exercise if you can get out and just show the jury exactly where the blood's located in this particular photograph.
So we can see some dark staining throughout the center area of this photograph. Here, we can also see some slight discoloration over the left side of it.
I know we're going to talk about how you swab these, but why don't we do it with placard A so you can kind of just show the jury what you did to collect this blood so that it could be tested
So
at a later time.
So to collect a sample of any biological fluid, we have a package that is sealed of 2 sterile cotton-tipped swabs. So that's opened at the time that we're ready to collect the sample. We open a new package of distilled water and then just dampen the 2 cotton-tipped swabs. And then those are both rubbed at the same time over the stains and then placed back into that packaging and sealed into something we call a coin envelope. So it's a smaller envelope.
And did you use 3 separate swabs for both A, B, and C placards?
Yes, they did.
And they're separated when you package them?
Correct. So when we place them in those individual coin envelopes, those are sealed separately from each other.
And then the big envelope is sealed, and then whoever gets into that envelope would have to sign something to know that someone's been in there. Is that how it works?
Correct. So when we create an evidence barcode label, and I believe in this case, all 3 of those swabs were placed in a larger envelope under the same evidence barcode and sealed by the crime scene investigator. And then any subsequent testing that occurs on evidence within that package, the evidence item or the packaging is noted, and then additional tape seals are added and signed by that analyst when the analysis is completed.
And Your Honor, for the record, the swabs from placards A, B, and C is People's Exhibit 386.
All right.
We can go now to 383, please. What do we see in People's Exhibit 383?
People's Exhibit 383, is a little bit of a different perspective, a little closer, where we can see, again, the 2 sticker scales that were on the garage floor. We're close to those 2x4s that were previously mentioned.
384?
People's Exhibit 384 is now a close-up photograph of the possible blood stains identified using placard B.
Could you point those out with a pointer, please?
Yes. So in this photograph, it's really concentrated toward the center, but the discoloration is in this general area and then extended into the upper left portion of the photograph.
And is that the area you swabbed then that we talked about earlier?
Yes, that would be the area the representative samples were collected.
385, you could probably stay there for this one. What do we see in 385?
People's Exhibit 385 is now a close-up of the stains that were identified using placard C. And I will point those out again, just directly above the actual sticker scale and then a little higher toward the center of the photograph.
Now, are these particular more visible, these blood, are they droplets or what are they?
So these appear to be more consistent with possible transfer stains to me, but these are a little bit more visible in this particular photograph than what we saw in B. If we look at the photograph, there's different photographs at different angles of B and C, and B is a little more visible in a different angle, and that just has more to do with the flash that occurred when that photograph was taken.
What's a transfer stain?
So a transfer stain is when blood is deposited on a surface from another surface.
Kind of speaks for itself, right?
It's just transferred onto an object.
You can resume your seat, thank you. If we can have 387 now, please. What do we see in People's Exhibit 387?
People's Exhibit 387 is a photograph that was taken in the backyard on the east side of the house. And of significance in the backyard is the trash dumpster, so we can see the green in the center of the photograph.
And were you made aware that these trash cans were searched on January 28th,
Yes, I was.
2020?
Yes.
Let's go to People's Exhibit 388. What do we see in People's Exhibit 388?
People's Exhibit 388 is a photograph taken in the basement, and this area was referred to in most of our reports as the basement living area. So this particular photograph, I believe in terms of orientation, we're looking southwest in the basement.
In the area that you alluded to, I know we have some other pictures of it where there were potential burn marks on the carpet. Could you just point that out for the jury so they could have some context with this picture?
Yes, and I'm going to stand up to do that.
Sure.
So in the upper right corner of the photograph, we have a couch here. And directly in front of that couch was an area rug, and we can actually see that here. And on top of it, in this particular photograph, you can see a section, rectangular section of carpet that matches the rest of the carpet throughout the residence.
Okay, thank you. 389. What do we see in 389?
People's Exhibit 389 is now standing in that living area portion of the room. So in the lower left corner, we can see that area rug that I had previously mentioned. And then we can also see the corner of the couch that it was in front of, and that's over on the left side of the photograph. In the center of the photograph, so we're looking east toward that love seat chair. There's 3 blankets, and they were kind of in a pile, and those blankets had burned debris on them.
We can go to 390 now. What do we see in 390?
People's Exhibit 390 is a close-up of those blankets that was located on the floor in front of that love seat, and we are able to see some of the charring and burned debris.
391. What do we see in 391?
People's Exhibit 391 is now in the search phase where we're actually looking at the items that were identified. So one of the blankets has been spread out, and we can see that there's a scale in this photograph showing where some dark burned debris is.
And did you spread this blanket out to take this photograph?
Yes.
And did you collect this blanket as evidence?
This blanket was collected, yes.
We can go to 392. What do we see in 392?
People's Exhibit 392 is just a close-up of the previous blanket in the area where we saw that scale of the burned debris.
And did you have any information as to whether or not these blankets were used to put the fire out or help put the fire out?
I don't know that I had specific information how these were related.
393. What do we see in 393?
People's Exhibit 393 is another one of the blankets that was in that pile. And on the left side of the photograph, we can see where it's bunched together and the discoloration. So where there was some black char marks.
We can go to 394.
People's Exhibit 394 is a photograph of the third blanket. We can see that there's a scale, and that was also very bunched around some burned debris.
And did you collect all these blankets, all 3?
All 3 of them were collected, yes.
We can go to 395 now, please. What do we see in 395?
People's Exhibit 395 is the couch that is located that I had pointed out in the first photograph when we were talking about the living room. So for context, that area where the removed carpet is directly in front of this couch. And on this couch are 3 teal pillows.
Can you also see some, what appears to be damage from hot wax, that kind of thing on this couch?
Yes, so over in the left side of the photograph, which would have been the west portion of the couch, there was some damage consistent with what appeared to be wax on the couch, as well as some charring or scorch marks.
And so for the record, we see a remote control there. Is it just next to that remote control in front of it?
It would be in front of and then to the left of that black remote control.
We can go to 396, please. What do we see in 396?
People's Exhibit 396 is looking toward the southwest corner of the living room. So just for context, we can see the TV in the upper left, and the couch, for reference, would be over on the right side of the photograph. And there's an additional teal pillow in that corner on the floor.
397? What do we see in 397?
People's Exhibit 397 is more of a mid-range photograph, but we've actually turned that pillow over. And in the center of the photograph, it's actually going to be in the right corner of the pillow. There was more of that kind of burned, charred material.
We can go to 398 now? Is that what you're talking about as we see in 398?
So 398 is a close-up with the scale, and yes, you can better see some of that burned material.
And did you collect this item as evidence? This pillow?
Yes, this pillow was collected.
And for the record, Your Honor, that's 399, People's Exhibit 399. We can go to 400 now. What do we see in People's Exhibit 400?
People's Exhibit 400 is actually being positioned against the west wall in the living room. So the couch, for reference, is what's on the left, and that love seat is over on the right. In the lower right-hand corner, we can see some of those blankets we talked about previously. But in the back center of this photograph, we can see an open door where we see boxes and bins, and that was a basement storage unit.
And can we see the staircase there to the left of that in the center of the picture, but it would go off to the left to go upstairs?
Yes, you can slightly see the banister or the hand railing, and that would be the staircase that leads to the upper level.
And so as you look at that storage room, if you go to the right, would that be where Gannon's room was?
Yes, so there is a hallway behind that wall, and his door was over to the right and actually shared a wall with the storage room.
We can go to People's Exhibit 401. What do we see in People's Exhibit 401?
People's Exhibit 401, we've now moved close to the entry to the storage room. So again, we can see the boxes and bins and then the concrete floor. And then as mentioned previously, there's a short hallway on the right side. So the door to Gannon's bedroom would be over on the right.
People's Exhibit 402. What do we see 402?
People's Exhibit 402 is a photograph that's taken standing in the entry to the basement storage room, so the bins and boxes previously mentioned. In this photograph, we're actually looking toward the southeast corner, and an item of interest that was observed in the southeast corner, which we can see in the center of the photograph, is a small section of carpet.
With regards to the boxes that we see in People's Exhibit 402, is that what it looked like on January 29th, 2020?
These appear to be the original overall photographs. So that's the series of photographs that we take prior to doing anything on scene. So this would be the condition of the storage room when we arrived.
We can go to People's Exhibit 403. What do we see in People's Exhibit 403?
People's Exhibit 403 is now standing inside that storage room. And on the left side, we can see the furnace, and toward the center, we can see the water heater. Those were actually positioned on the same wall, which would be the west wall, as the entry into the storage room.
People's Exhibit 404. What do we see in People's Exhibit 404?
People's Exhibit 404 is just slightly rotated to the right from that previous photo and down so that we can see the concrete floor. If it helps for reference in terms of from the previous photo, that bottle of Gain in the previous photo, if you go back one.
We're at 403 now.
So it's shifted slightly to the right and down.
And go back to 404. Now in People's Exhibit 404, there seems to be a box there at the lower portion middle there. Do you recognize that box?
I do. So in the lower portion of the photograph, there is a box that has Amazon tape. And if I recall correctly, based on the marker, the writing on it, that was a box that was collected in a following response out to that residence.
Did you go back to the residence on February 21st, 2020?
I did, yes.
And did you go back and completely clean out this entire storage room, look at every item that's in there, look at all the floor for blood?
Yes, so that was the purpose of that following response, was to remove every item from the storage room and inspect it for possible blood stains.
And this is where the box was, at least on January 29th, 2020, when you initially searched that storage room.
Yes, based on the overall photographs, it is.
We'll talk about that box when we get to the February 21st, okay?
Okay.
Don't let me forget.
Okay.
All right, let's go to, I'm sorry. Ready? Okay, if we can go to 405 now, please. What do we see in People's Exhibit 405?
People's Exhibit 405, we're actually looking at the north wall of the storage room. So for orientation, based on where I'm standing, the entry would actually be back and to my right. And of interest in this particular photograph on the left side is a gun box, the M&P bodyguard. And then also of interest in this photograph, kind of toward the northeast corner, we can see the corner of a red suitcase underneath a box. And then just to the right of that, we can see a small section of carpet again.
Did you do the best you could to take pictures of all the suitcases in the storage room?
So in this series of overall photographs, these are the photographs of all of the items in their position when we arrived. So nothing was moved in order to be able to take better photographs of them at this point.
You may not, I don't know if you recall this or not, but the pink suitcase that we see in the center of the photograph, was that suitcase there on February 21st, 2020, when you went back and searched the entire storage room?
I don't recall offhand without going through those photos and looking closer.
Don't let me forget about that one either.
Okay.
There's another item. I want to refer to a tub there that appears to have cables in it that's on the right-hand side of the photograph in the center there. Do you see that?
I do. So all the way along the right edge, we can see a clear tub that has a purple handle. You can see just the edge of it. So that was another item of interest that was located and collected on a following response on the 21st.
And at least on January 29th, 2020, that's where that tub is when you're out there processing the storage room.
That's correct.
And did that tub later have blood on it?
It had what appeared to be possible blood stains on it when I observed it.
You don't like it when I say blood, right?
Unfortunately, we're not allowed to say that because we can't confirm it. But based on our training and experience, that was the reason it was collected. It appeared consistent with blood stains.
And is that why we talked about that Amazon box earlier as well?
Correct. So there were possible blood stains observed on that box.
Okay. We can now go to People's Exhibit. What are we at? 406, please. What do we see in People's Exhibit 406?
So People's Exhibit 406, we've rotated slightly to the right from the previous photograph. So we're now looking at the southeast corner of the storage room. For reference again, in the lower left-hand corner, we see that red suitcase that I mentioned previously. It's very difficult to see, but just a tiny piece of the carpet in the lower left corner. And the previously mentioned clear tub with the purple handle. And if it helps again with reference, the wall over on the right side is actually the wall that would be shared with Gannon's bedroom.
We can go to 407 now. What do we see in People's Exhibit 407?
So People's Exhibit 407 is at the point where we've started removing some objects from the basement storage room. So we can now see that red suitcase a little bit more clearly. And there are some carpet fibers sitting on top. And then directly behind it, slightly to the right, we can see a larger section of carpet that I had mentioned that was mostly covered in some of those previous overall photographs.
And as you're searching the storage room on January 29th, 2020, as well as February 21st, 2020, did you ever see a large olive green suitcase in the storage room?
I don't recall seeing one.
Did you ever see the suitcase that Gannon's body was recovered in?
No, I did not.
Have you ever seen it under the bridge or at any time?
I've not seen it at all.
If you would have saw that in that time, would you have photographed it as you photographed these suitcases here?
Well, everything was photographed as I observed it during that time. And obviously the suitcase was found sometime later, but I was never shown what that suitcase looked like.
And do we also see the tub that you said had presumptive blood on it in this photograph?
So that clear tub with the purple handles, yes, is over on the right side of the photograph.
We can go to 408 now, please. What do we see in People's Exhibit 408?
People's Exhibit 408 is now a closer photograph of the top of that red suitcase. And toward the back area is actually where we can see some of the carpet fibers and carpet debris.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but did you later find some carpet that had been cut to kind of cover that area where the burnt carpet was?
Yes, yes, they did.
Did you eventually collect the carpet that we see in People's Exhibit 408?
Yes, so during the search portion of this storage room, that section of carpet was actually pulled out of that room and opened.
In this point for the jury where the carpet is in this photograph, just so we all know where it's at.
So your red suitcase and then kind of the carpet fibers and debris toward the back. And then the large folded section of carpet is directly behind it in the center photograph up top.
Great, thank you. We can go to 409 now, please. What do we see in 409?
People's Exhibit 409 is a close-up so that you can better see some of the carpet debris and carpet fibers on top of that suitcase. And then to the right side, we can see a part of that carpet.
410? What do we see in People's Exhibit 410?
People's Exhibit 410 is when that section of carpet was pulled out of the storage room. It had been rolled and folded. And when I opened the fold, concealed inside was a smaller piece of carpet that had possible blood stains on it.
And can you point that out for the jury just so we can distinguish between the small piece and the large piece?
So the large portion of the carpet was this entire section. And then the small section concealed inside, right in the center where we can see some very visible staining.
Can we go to 412 now, please? What do we see in 412?
People's Exhibit 412 is a close-up photograph of the possible blood stains observed on that smaller piece of carpet. And then we do have a scale in the photograph.
And you collected the smaller piece of carpet, I take it?
Both sections of carpet were collected, yes.
And the small piece of carpet, Your Honor, would be People's Exhibit 413. The large piece is People's Exhibit 711.
All right.
We can go to 414 now. What do we see in 414?
People's Exhibit 412.
412, right.
It's helpful to have these photos up here. People's Exhibit 412 is that smaller section of carpet that we just saw the photographs of with the visible stains. It's now been turned over. And what's of note in this photograph is that we can see some additional stains on the top surface in the lower right corner and in the center, and that the actual entire section of carpet is discolored in comparison to the rest of the carpet underneath.
And could you tell whether or not looking at these stains on either side, what kind of stain it is? You alluded to transfer stains when we were in the garage.
Not necessarily, at least on the upper side of the carpet, due to the texture of the carpet. Looking on the other side, the fact that it's gone through, typically we might call something like that a saturation stain, where it has actually gone through the carpet.
So is that what we're talking about as we see in 411?
Yes.
So that's more of a saturated stain?
Potentially. It's difficult to say, but it is consistent with some type of transfer or saturation stain.
Now we can jump ahead to 414. What do we see in 414?
People's Exhibit 414. So this large section of carpet that I removed that had the smaller one with the visible stains, when I opened that entire section of carpet, there were two corners that had been cut off and were missing. This People's Exhibit 414 shows a section of carpet. So when we go back into the living room, and I had mentioned that there was a section of carpet placed over the area that had been cut out. This is showing that section of carpet that had been in the living room and showing the visible seams appearing to match as if that section of carpet had been cut off this larger one.
Going back to the red suitcase with carpet fibers on it, the carpet's found right next to that?
Yes, so that's that very big folded one. That's that piece of carpet.
Would it be consistent with someone cutting the carpet over the suitcase in the storage room?
I don't know where it would have been cut, but having the carpet fibers on top of the suitcase just indicates to me that that carpet had been moved or manipulated.
Okay. We can go to 415 now. What do we see in People's Exhibit 415?
So People's Exhibit 415, we are now seeing that area in the basement living room in front of the couch. So for reference, the couch is in the upper right-hand corner. You can see the remote and those burn marks on the couch that we had talked about previously. We can see a patch of carpet has been cut out in a square or rectangle. And then we can see the black padding underneath. And it might be difficult to tell in this photograph, but the shape and characteristics were pretty consistent and appeared to be burn and char marks in that padding.
416?
People's Exhibit 416 shows a patch of carpet covering that. In the right side of the photograph, we can see that area rug we talked about previously as well that's been pulled back. So when we arrived, that area rug was in place as if it would be normally on the floor. And when it was pulled back, this is what we observed, was this extra piece of carpet placed on top of that cutout. And that previous one showing the cutout corner that was matched with the seams is this piece of carpet.
We can go back to 416, please. 415. And people that did the 415, what was your understanding on how this fire started that we see the results from in 415?
The information that I was provided was that while Gannon was playing video games on the 26th, he knocked over a candle and somehow that caused the fire.
Is that consistent with your training, your everyday knowledge, a candle falling on the carpet, burning right through the carpet, through the pad, all the way to the concrete?
That's not what I would expect to see, no.
Why is that?
I wouldn't expect, a lot of carpet and materials are made to be more burn resistant. So you could hold a lighter to carpet and it's not instantaneously going to burst into flames. We've also had training with our local fire department where we've actually done that exercise, laid carpet out, held a lighter or a torch, trying to set it on fire, and then doing that with different ignitable fluids to see how long it would take to actually set and burst into flames.
Would it take a significant amount of heat to create that char mark?
It would, and it would have to be a sustained heat. So not just a quick, without some type of ignitable source.
Now, with regards to this area, the jury's heard about Blue Star, so we don't need to get into that, but did you Blue Star this area to see whether or not there's areas that you needed to swab?
Yes, so on that first response, because this is the area of the primary disturbance and things out of the ordinary, that's the room they requested I do Blue Star in, and it was done in this area, yes.
And did you swab that area based on the results of your Blue Star?
There were swabs collected from a few areas in the living room, yes, based on a presumptive positive.
Can you point out the general area where you swab?
I remember correctly, the area on the carpet that I had a presumptive positive reaction was in this section, which would be the lower left portion of that cutout square.
And same process as you did in the garage, sealed, so others could test that swab at a later time?
That's correct, yes.
Now, before we leave the January 29th search, did you also go into Gannon's room on the 29th?
Yes, we did.
Did you smell anything when you went into Gannon's room?
So as a part of the walkthrough with one of the detectives who had been there the previous day on the 28th, he had mentioned an unusual, and that's how it was described to me, an unusual odor in Gannon's bedroom near the center and an unusual odor near the light switch. So I did detect an odor in the room, but it wasn't one necessarily that I could place. I couldn't characterize it as something that was familiar to me as traditional bleach or cleaning products. Also of note was that there was odor of urine, so pet urine throughout the basement, including in there.
And did you know they had a couple dogs that lived in the house as well?
I did. I don't know if it showed the photographs, but in the area next to the basement living room along the south wall, there were 2 dog crates and there were actually dogs in them at the time that I was there.
And so in between January 29th and February 21st, had other members of your lab, the Metro Crime Lab, gone out to search this residence?
Yes.
Had you gone out there on different occasions as well?
I had been out there a total of 3 times, but I wasn't with each of the CSIs for each time the Metro Crime Lab responded.
And so on the January 29th and February 21st, you did a report based on what you did at that residence.
That's correct.
And others would do reports based on what they did, for instance, on February 3rd or February 5th, that kind of thing?
Yes, so I did respond on February 3rd, but I did not complete a report. CSI Lewer was the primary CSI who responded, and I came to assist. And based on items that were located during that search, we also called an additional CSI Alyssa Beresford, to come out and assist with some documentation. So I assisted both of them, but since I didn't do anything independently of them, I didn't complete a report for that response.
So let's now talk about the 21st, February. What new information did you get with regards to why you needed to go back and search the residence again?
The basic information that I was provided was from Sergeant Hubble with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, that he wanted to remove and search all of the objects in the basement storage room for possible bloodstains. And I don't know the specifics to why, but I know that a meeting had occurred prior to my going out that day between the Sheriff's Office and the FBI, and there was some interest in some saws in the garage.
Had there been a board found that may have had some blood on it out in the Palmer Lake area?
Yes, so right before responding, I had also been informed that a particle board had been recovered near Larkspur off Highway 105, I believe it was, and that there were possible blood stains on it. And I was shown a photograph of what was recovered by one of our DNA analysts, and we observed that a corner or a small section of that particle board was missing. And so they also asked that we search the garage to see if that possible corner was in there.
And did you find a possible corner for that particular board?
No, we did not.
And before we move on, Your Honor, 417 is the swabs that were taken from the basement carpet that CSI Brooke testified to earlier. So we can now go to 418. Now we're on February 21st, 2020. What do we see in People's Exhibit 418?
So People's Exhibit 418 is a similar photograph to one we've seen before, just at a later date of the entry to the basement storage room. And we can see it looks significantly different. It's more organized. I can see more of the floor in this photograph.
So someone went through and stacked all the boxes neatly, it looks like, and there were items moved around differently than what they looked like on January 29th.
It certainly appears far more organized than when I saw it the first time, yes.
We can go to 419 now. What do we see in 419?
People's Exhibit 419 is an additional photograph inside that basement storage room. We can see again part of the floor and see that the boxes are a little more organized.
And we see a tub there that appears to have cables in it on the top left corner of that photograph.
That's correct. So that is that tub we've discussed previously, the clear one with the purple handles on top.
420. What do we see in People's Exhibit 420?
People's Exhibit 420 is same angle as the previous shot, just rotated up. So now we can actually see the top portion of that tub that we had mentioned before on the left side of the photograph.
421. Now what do we see in 421?
People's Exhibit 421 is when the tub has been removed and placed in the basement living room so that we can inspect it better with flashlights to search for possible blood stains.
And did you do that?
I did do that, yes.
422. What do we see in 422?
People's Exhibit 422 is a photograph that I actually took during the evidence processing portion. So this was taken, I believe, a few days later in the lab with the evidence barcode label and is an overall photograph of the item.
For the record, People's Exhibit 423 is this plastic tub that we see in People's Exhibit 422.
All right.
424. What do we see in People's Exhibit 424?
People's Exhibit 424 is these are photographs taken in the lab. And what I've done in these is added the adhesive sticker scales that were used for those blood stains on the garage floor just to highlight them. And these are going to be close-up photographs showing stains that were visible on this tub.
So just to the left of this marker, we see what?
So between the purple handle and the sticker scale, we can see some visible stains consistent with possible blood stains.
425? What do we see in 425?
People's Exhibit 425 is another sticker scale, and this was placed to show the discoloration located at the corner of the tub all the way to the left.
426?
People's Exhibit 426 is that same corner. We've just rotated to the other side. And just based on the change in light, we can actually see that there's some discoloration on both sides of the corner.
427?
People's Exhibit 427 are some visible stains located to the left of the scale underneath the lid.
428?
People's Exhibit 428 is showing a stain on the right side of the tub in this photograph on the lip, the under part of underneath the lid.
429?
People's Exhibit 429 is a close-up. I believe we saw this particular stain. It might have been the first photograph that we showed. It's just a closer photograph.
430?
People's Exhibit 430 is an additional possible blood stain located on the edge after the lid was taken off.
431?
People's Exhibit 431 are some additional possible blood stains that are actually on the lip as well as the underneath portion.
And can you tell what kind of blood stains these are, whether they're transfer, drip?
So these appear consistent with a transfer stain. We can actually see the visible swipe marks that appear vertical on these stains.
And 432?
People's Exhibit 432 appears to me to actually be the same stains as the previous photograph, just pulled back a little bit so you can see more of it.
Now, do you know whether or not this tub actually went to a serologist, Sherry Holes, to do the swabbing and prepare it for DNA testing?
So this item was transferred directly to a DNA analyst. I believe I thought it was Donna Minogue, but if it was Sherry, I would have to double check the chain of custody.
But you didn't swab these blood stains?
No, so at the request of our DNA unit, they were photographed and then they wanted to collect the samples for their testing.
Okay. Now we can go to 433, please. What do we see in 433?
People's Exhibit 433 was the cardboard box we've talked about a couple times now with the Amazon Prime tape and some of the Sharpie marks on it. And inside that box are 2 Apple iPhones. And on 2 sides of this box were stains that appeared to be possible blood stains.
434? Go ahead.
People's Exhibit 434 is a photograph taken in the lab. So we can see the evidence barcode label that was created. This is an overall photograph, and in the upper left portion of the corner to the left of the Amazon Prime tape, we can see 2 areas of stains.
Your Honor, for the record, 435 is the actual Amazon box that's in evidence.
Okay.
436? What do we see in 436?
People's Exhibit 436 is a close-up of those 2 stains mentioned previously to the left of the Amazon tape.
And would these be transfer stains or some other type of stain?
They appear consistent based on some of the movement to be a transfer stain.
437? What do we see in 437?
People's Exhibit 437 is an even closer photograph of the lower stain to the left of the Amazon tape.
And People's Exhibit 438?
People's Exhibit 438 is actually the opposite side of the Amazon box and with some visible possible blood stains located there.
Transfer stain?
It appears consistent with a transfer stain with that movement and kind of filtering effect that we see.
So if this is in fact blood, would that be consistent with a bloody object rubbing against the box?
Yes, it would.
People 439? What do we see in People's Exhibit 439 now?
People's Exhibit 439 is inside that basement storage room. We can see the concrete floor and we can see Sharpie marks on the floor. So after all of the items had been taken out of the storage room, we did do Blue Star on the basement, and then the areas with the presumptive positive reaction were actually circled with Sharpies.
And Did you photograph the blue star in the basement?
So there was an attempt made and we had a bit of a camera malfunction. And when that started happening, that's actually when I decided to go ahead and circle the areas where we had that reaction. The reaction was observed by 4 individuals, but that way we could have a visual of the areas that had that presumptive positive blue glow.
440? What do we see in 440?
People's Exhibit 440 is again a photograph of the floor of the basement storage room where we can see the circled Sharpie marks. We can actually still see some of the spray from the liquid blue star as well. But for point of reference, in the upper left corner, we can see kind of the 2x4. So that's actually where the entry was. So this actually spanned across the storage room to the northeast corner, kind of where a sump pump was located.
Could you use the pointer again and just kind of point out where the circles are? I don't know, maybe we can, I need to go over there and turn the lights down on that switch.
It's up to you. It's the green buttons there,
Which one?
both of them.
That helps. Can you point out the circles now on the,
So entry is going to be over here in the upper left, and we can see the furnace back here. So we have areas circled here spanning across the entire photograph all the way over to the lower right corner of the photograph.
now, does that go towards where we saw that clear tub that you collected with the purple handles on January 29th, 2020?
From what I recall, it spanned again to the northeast corner, which is kind of toward the corner for reference where the red suitcase and that large carpet roll was. I would have to see another photograph to remember where that tub was on that at that time.
Okay. Let's go to 441, then we'll go back to that photograph, okay? What do we see in 441?
People's Exhibit 441 is actually a photograph to where we're seeing the northeast corner. So we can see the sump pump back in the upper right-hand corner. And we have the same area where we can see the Sharpie circles going into that corner, and you can actually still see some of the liquid spray marks around them.
We can go back to 407 now, please.
And if you could find a reasonable breaking point in the next couple of minutes, please.
Yep, we're going to finish up with this and
Thought that was it.
okay, we have 407 up now. There's the red suitcase that you alluded to. Do you see the tub there?
Yes. So based on seeing this photograph and the proximity of the tub to that area, yes, so those did go in that general direction. That sump pump I had mentioned is actually just to the left behind all of those boxes.
Those are my questions, Jar. Thanks.
Okay. Ms. I like boss. No. Ms. Bell, I'm gonna have you step down. And, because I have some things that I need to attend to. So, I'll have you step down. You'll have to come back on Monday.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So we'll see you back on Monday at 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am.
Darren, do you mind if I go slip those light?
Yes, please. I was gonna ask somebody to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, we will take our weekend break. Again, I'm going to go through the long instruction that you probably are tired of, but I still need to read it anyway. You've probably already guessed that there's been some public or media interest in this case. There could be more in the coming weeks. You must guard against that, as you will be required to decide this case based on the evidence presented and the instructions that I give to you. Again, you can tell your friends and family that you are on this jury and how long you think it will go. You can ask for their help in avoiding exposure to stories or even opinions from others regarding this case. But you cannot otherwise discuss anything about this case with anyone, and you should not listen to any opinions regarding this case from someone else. You can still blog or communicate with others, just not about this case. You can't do any blogging about your jury experience or communication with other jurors. You can still watch TV. You can still go on the internet. You still can patronize Amazon, but you just can't do anything about this case. If anything regarding this case comes through your feed, change the channel, turn the page, do not give it any attention. You are not allowed to look at, read, consult, or use any material of any kind, including any newspapers, magazines, television, and radio broadcasts, dictionaries, medical, scientific, technical, religious, or law books or materials, or the internet in connection with your jury service. I want to emphasize that you must not seek or receive any information about this case from the internet, which includes all social networking, Google, Wikipedia, blogs, and other websites. You are not allowed to do any research of any kind about this case. So I'm going to dismiss, or I'm going to send all of you, almost all of you, home right now. We have, as you know, we're referring to all of the jurors by numbers, and you guys are probably going crazy because your numbers keep changing. Every time you come back, you have a different seat number, and it's based upon where you are when you come back in that group and where you are seated. So in this case, I'm going to let everybody leave except for juror number 12, white hoodie, hoop earrings. I need her to stay for just a few minutes. Everybody else is excused. Enjoy your weekend. And juror number 12, if you can remain with us for a moment. All rise for the jury, please. And juror number 10, if you just want to let yourself out. Thank you. You may all be seated. Record should reflect that all of the jurors except for juror number 12 have left the courtroom. If we did our work right, I have the right juror. If we didn't, I apologize. I think you probably know why you might be here. Are you the juror that communicated to Mr. Combs that you knew one of the witnesses? Okay. You probably feel a little weird with everybody staring at you right now, but you did the right thing. Okay. This happens. It's really not that uncommon that somebody looks through the witness list and goes, I don't know any of these people. They don't recognize names. Names sometimes change. Sometimes they just don't remember the name, and then they see the face and they remember the person. And they do the right thing. They tell us that they know one of the witnesses. So who is it that you know, and how is it that you know that person?
So I know the expert witness, Stephanie Happ. I think was her last name, distantly.
Okay. How is it that you know her?
So about 3 years ago, I was a worship leader at a church. My dad was the pastor. Stephanie's mother-in-law attended that church. Stephanie did not. Stephanie's mother-in-law is getting up in years and wanted to discuss with my father and I, as her pastoral staff, her wishes for her for her funeral. And she wanted to do that while she was still alive. So about 3 years ago, this person that attended our church gathered my father and mother and I at what turned out to be Stephanie's house, and along with her other children, to discuss her end of life wishes. So for about a couple of hours, we were in that home discussing funeral arrangements. And then we all greeted one another warmly, and I left.
Okay.
Then, as it turns out, last October, this same church member of ours had an adult daughter who passed away from stomach cancer. Because I was part of the clergy of this thing, Janice asked me to sing at her daughter's funeral. So I did that. And at that funeral, I saw Stephanie, greeted her, gave her a hug, told her I was very sorry for her loss, and we've gone our separate ways. So those are the 2 times that I have seen and spoken with Stephanie.
Okay. So I have to ask this question. Did you, and I know it's going to sound kind of foolish, but did you or did she mention anything about this case to you during either one of those instances?
Absolutely not.
do you, or would you be able to judge her testimony just as you've been able to judge everybody else's testimony in this case?
Absolutely.
Is there anything about the context that you've had with her that would make you say, you know, I'm going to believe her because I know her, or I'm going to disbelieve her because I know her, something along those lines? Do you think that you can weigh her testimony just as you would weigh the testimony of any other witness in this case?
I do.
Do you believe that you can still remain fair and impartial? Do you believe you can still remain a fair and impartial juror in this case, even though you've had some contacts with one witness and not others?
I do.
All right. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you back to the jury room. I want you to wait there for a couple of minutes while I talk with the lawyers, and then I will get back to you, okay? And what you can tell the jurors, if somebody asks, you can tell them that you had a discussion, or we had a discussion here because you disclosed rightly that you recognized one of the witnesses after you saw them, and we had to ask you about that. Don't tell them who the witness was that you knew. Don't tell them what our conversation was, anything else like that. But at least this way they'll know what the conversation was, and they will know that the right thing to do in a situation like this is to say, hey, I know one of those witnesses, and let us know. Okay? All right. All rise for juror 12, please. Thank you. You may all be seated. Record should reflect that juror number 12 has left the courtroom. Are there any challenges to juror number 12 continuing to serve as a juror in this case? Prosecution?
No, Judge, the juror was very conscientious, brought this information to us immediately, it sounds like. Talked about 2 passing interactions that she had with Ms. Happ some years ago, and indicates that she can still be very fair and impartial in this case, and is not going to give her any special deference or anything like that. So I don't think there's any reason from our perspective that she would be challenged for cause.
Defense?
I'm going to move to have her excused for a couple of different reasons. One, I'm not alleging any bad faith or anything on the part of this juror, but it appears that it's more than a passing connection. It sounded, at least what I was gathering, it sounded like she was hoping to do end of life planning for Ms. Happ's. I thought it was her mother, that there was a couple hour long meeting at the house, that there was a connection with a shared church, a religious connection. Part of the issue is, Your Honor, this is not just a lay or perceiving witness. This is an expert witness whose opinion these jurors are going to have to determine the basis of their opinion and how they value their opinion and so forth. So it's not just whether she would give her more credibility. It's also how that she would weigh her expert opinion on this. And it's expert opinion that is key to this case. Ms. Happ has identified the gun in question that she testified about as being the gun that actually killed Gannon Stauch. Furthermore, they're going to have later evidence that is going to put Ms. Stauch's DNA on that gun. And so this is the key connection of all the other, there's everything else is there's a lot of circumstantial. I mean, this is pretty direct tie with Ms. Stauch to the weapon that this witness is saying actually killed Gannon Stauch. So based upon that, I would say it's a little bit different situation because it's an expert and it's her opinion that she's going to be judging, and she does have a relationship with her. Further, Your Honor, I can say that that juror was one of the ones we had a lot of debate on as far as whether or not to use a preemptory challenge on. It was down, she was our last one. It was her and another juror. Whoever we used our last preemptory on, the choice was between her and that juror. Had we known that she had this kind of connection with this expert witness, we would use a preemptory challenge on her. We're, I think, more than or close to halfway through this trial. We have 6 alternate jurors on this case. I think that it's a cleaner to excuse her at this time with her things and move one of the alternates on. And that way we can go forward.
All right. I want to think about this over the weekend. I'm also going to review her questionnaire again as well, and also the seating and strike chart to see where we were or to see how the peremptories shook out. I don't know, since she was not excused, whether that will help me a whole lot, but I want to look at two of those things, and then I will make a decision before we start trial on Monday.
Okay.
We'll go from there.
Yeah, we just have one other issue to bring up.
Go ahead.
Judge. Are you ready for it now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. It's come to our attention.
Hold on just a
Okay.
second. She can go ahead and go, and we'll see her back on that. Okay, Mr. Allen.
It's come to our attention that during the, I think mostly the afternoon session of witnesses today, that the defendant has been flipping the bird potentially to witnesses or to our family that are here for Gannon. And there have been pictures that have been passed to me during this process. One, it's disrespectful to this court. It's disrespectful to this process. And I would ask the court to admonish her to refrain from acting this way in the future during the pendency of this case.
Okay. I've not seen any of that, but on the other hand, the defendant is to my far right. I can see her some on a screen, but I'll just take it as is. Ms. Stauch, what you need to understand is that I can control the conduct of an awful lot of people in the courtroom, including yours. And don't do that. Don't show that kind of, don't be making disrespectful gestures to witnesses, to people, to family members, anything like that. You need to understand that if that continues, I can have you removed and the trial will continue without you. And you will sit in a holding cell in this building, and every time we take a break, I'll bring you back up to ask whether or not you can conform your conduct to what I'm requiring. If you choose to act in a disruptive behavior or disruptive fashion, I'll just have you removed and we'll continue on without you, and then we'll check and see if you want to come back and behave in a respectful manner. So I'll just leave it at that, and we will see where we are on Monday. All right. All right, court will be in recess. You can leave everything here. The only thing that I for sure want to have locked up is the gun and the ammunition. I don't ever leave that out. So that we need to make sure gets into a locker somewhere or into an evidence closet somewhere. Other than that, we'll see everybody 9 o'clock on Monday morning.
All rise.